So it's 7:05 or coming up on it. We have a few of our members who will be still joining, but I think we'll get started. My name is Bill Reardon. I'm the chairman of the Harbor Development Committee. Here so far this evening are Vice Chairman Paul Lasordo in the yellow shirt, our Harbor Master Ken Corson, Member Tom Coveney, to my left Eric Cashel, and Deirdre Anderson. I know Ed Morris is going to be a little late. I'm expecting Brian Knees shortly. I think given the lack of our other members, in the interest of having more here for the minutes, we'll defer on the discussion of the minutes. It's listed as the first topic on the agenda, but I think I'd rather get into the presentation, which I know is what the public is here for. And we are very grateful to HCAM also for covering this meeting and making available a tape of this session that will be available to the public probably within about 48 hours, something on that order. So the principal focus of tonight's meeting is two presentations. They're very much related. The first stems from a survey which the Harbor Development Committee undertook in the October timeframe. Deirdre Anderson, our member, is going to lead that discussion. And she's the one who really led the charge in doing the survey. I'll let her put that in context. The second presentation, which is intimately linked with the first, the first was a survey of both harbor facilities and also of the transportation corridor, Route 3A, the Rotary, beginning to think about how the town addresses the issues that we have known about on that portion of the harbor for a long time, and the issues which town meeting approved an engineering sum of $400,000 to begin to explore engineering responses and plans, so that when and if the state or the town are able to actually proceed with modifications to that roadway, that we will have a starting point to do that. So Roger will be then picking up on another piece of that, which is that the Central Transportation Planning staff of the Mass DOT, which is the planning group, conducted a traffic study. Many of us saw the tapes out in the late summer. They were on Summer Street. They were on Justice Cushing Highway. They went all the way to the entrance to the bathing beach. And going down toward Hull, I think they went as far as on George Washington Boulevard for an extended period. And Roger has the presentation which the Mass DOT has provided with respect to the results of that study. So it's going to be an interesting evening. I see the two as very much connected. At this point, I'll pass the baton to member Deirdre Anderson to walk us through the survey. And the way I'd like to proceed tonight is we'll have Deirdre speak first, have a portion of questions that might relate to the survey alone, but cut that off at some point, allow Roger to speak, and then have questions on both Roger's presentation, and to the extent that these are connected, we would have further conversation from those of the public present. So Deirdre, I'll give it off to you. I'm going to adjust the lighting for you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. As Bill mentioned, I'm Deirdre Anderson, and I'm on the Harbor Development Committee. And tonight we're going to present and discuss with you the survey results of the Harbor Route 3A survey that was sponsored by the Harbor Development Committee this past fall. And first question, why did the Harbor Development Committee do a survey? The primary reason was that the town did vote to award $400,000 to begin study of Route 3A, the Rotary, and Summer Street at last spring's town meeting. And as part of that, that article came as a citizen's petition, and as part of that petition, it was we obligated to collect community input as to what citizens felt were the most pressing issues on Route 3A, the Rotary, and Summer Street. So that is the primary driver behind this survey. And because we have learned as a community that you really can't separate discussion of Hingham Harbor's development and redevelopment without discussing Route 3A and the Rotary and Summer Street, we took this as an opportunity to combine what is the current vision for the Hingham Harbor's future? And the town did a master plan in 2007, and this was an opportunity to collect wide citizen input on an updated vision of what people want to see in Hingham Harbor. And finally, the hope was, knowing that simultaneous to town action on Route 3A and the Rotary and Summer Street and the harbor, that the state had also begun a study on Route 3A and George Washington Boulevard. The hope was that the results of this survey could inform the state work, or how the town interprets the state suggestions for this traffic corridor. So that was the reason for the survey. And how we conducted the survey was online. We utilized an online system called SurveyMonkey, and we ran the survey for a roughly 3-week period between the end of September and October 16th. We had a lot of community help in promoting the survey. First from the town web manager, Kate Richardson, was instrumental in putting the link on the site, in using the town push email system to get word of the survey out to anyone signed up for that email notification system. The Recreation Department with Mark Thorell distributed this survey to all of its email clients. And we used social media, the Hingham Pin Board, Friends of Hingham Harbor, individual members promoted the existence of the survey on their social media. The Hingham Journal ran 2 consecutive articles about the presence of the survey online. And finally, some good old-fashioned signage. The selectmen were generous in letting us post signs at the Common, the Sewer Department at the intersection of 3A and Downing and Thaxter Street and Lincoln. So we saw a real uptick with the initial advertisement through social media, and then a second uptick was when all the signs went up around town. And the response was fantastic. We had over 1,513 citizens to complete the survey in that period. That approaches 10% of Hingham's voting population, which far surpassed any survey that the town had done previously. As we have now learned, as is typical in internet surveys, the responses were a majority of women, and a third of the respondents were between the ages of 35 and 44. So while that was the profile of our raw data, that obviously doesn't represent Hingham's actual gender distribution or age distribution. So we quickly realized, in addition, we had an overwhelming amount of data. As we will discuss later on in this presentation, there were hundreds of comments in addition to people answering the survey questions. And so we knew we needed some professional help to analyze that data. And through social media, a interested citizen, Sky Weissman, who was a resident of Triphammer Road, we had made a call for assistance in statistical analysis, and Sky connected us with her father-in-law. And Professor Frederick Weissman is at the Demore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University, and he generously offered to help us analyze the data using the SPSS statistical analysis software. Professor Weissman did this pro bono, and we are very grateful for his assistance. And he was able to adjust the data to accurately represent age and gender in Hingham. And so all of the results we discuss tonight and present represent that statistical validity. So what we thought would be helpful is to go through what ended up being just very baseline questions about the corridor and use of transportation, and then focus more in what quickly became themes of the survey, which were Summer Street safety, the road and 3A safety, the Rotary, and future use for the harbor. So we're going to compact the first 9 questions of the survey into this baseline overview. We had people identify the neighborhoods they were in. Virtually every neighborhood was represented. There was a survey design error in that we omitted the shipyard as a drop-down option, and we won't do that again, but fortunately there was an other box, and the shipyard and Beale Street, where there is obviously significant growth in town, were represented in an equal fashion to other neighborhoods in town. As you might imagine, neighborhoods that directly abutted 3A, such as North Street, Hingham Harbor, Otis Hill, Crow Point, World's End, Summer Street, we had significant feedback. But again, every neighborhood was represented. We had over 282 non-residents respond to the survey, and that primarily was probably through signage along 3A. In terms of, obviously, a first question had to be, how much do you use Hingham's Inner Harbor? And as a point of clarification, because Hingham Harbor includes both the shipyard and World's End, the area that you see here on our master plan map is considered Hingham's Inner Harbor. And the question was, do you own or use a watercraft, boat, kayak, paddleboard on Hingham's Inner Harbor? And the response to that was 57% of residents do not, 43% of residents do. In terms, questions 4 through 7 focused on Route 3A, Summer Street travel, frequency, and purpose and mode of transportation. The majority of respondents are on Route 3A, Summer Street every day. In the winter, 47% are there between 5 to 7 days a week, and in the summer, that jumps to 67% of respondents are on Summer Street 5 to 7 days per week. The purpose, 60% of the respondents was personal, and the mode of transportation was primarily alone in car or in car with family. We had very low responses to bicyclists and pedestrians. So that can give you a baseline. Question 8 dealt with how often are you accessing public transportation from Route 3A and the Rotary and Summer Street, namely the bus stations, the train stations, the commuter boat. The Hingham commuter boat in the shipyard was the most frequent public transportation accessed. The Route 220 bus route in Station Street was the least public transportation accessed. Recreational areas, we queried what recreational areas people were using this corridor to get to. Nantasket Beach was the overwhelming most frequent recreational area utilized, but there was the other recreational areas, Weir River Estuary Park, the trustees' properties at Weir River Farm, World's End were well represented, as well as the Lincoln Maritime Center. So now we'll dive into the main themes of the survey, which came clear. And question 10 queried to say which of the following statements, excuse me, I'm off the wrong one. Question 10 asked respondents to please rank your concerns regarding Route 3A Rotary Summer Street corridor from least, 1, to greatest, 5. We queried about over 10 issues, everything from road width to sea level rise, and the top 3 concerns, 4, and we have broken this out now to be Hingham residents, were lack of sidewalks on both sides of the street. It was the greatest concern with 58.5%. The narrow width between traffic and people, which is an inadequate shoulder on the roadway, 57% of respondents, and the speed of other vehicles, 54.7% of respondents felt that those 3 issues were the top challenges to this roadway. And the mean over here, you can see where it's on a scale of 1 to 5, 3.72 felt that the lack of sidewalk, and that was the biggest concern, 3.68, the inadequate shoulder, and 3.61, the speed of other vehicles. We will be posting the full survey responses online so you can go through and see how other challenges to the roadway stacked up. Some of the comments, as we mentioned, we received a tremendous amount of commentary from respondents, and this is representative. The survey respondents said, I have a love-hate relationship with this corridor. On the one hand, it is arguably the most scenic drive in all of Hingham, and I feel very fortunate to the harbor to see the harbor so many times a day. On the other hand, I literally feel like I take my life in my hands every time I drive through it. Couple other comments. I have lived in Hingham my whole life, and if I can avoid 3A and the Rotary, I do. Finally, we hope for the Rotary area and all of the area along the harbor to become safer and more pedestrian-friendly. We have a deep desire to spend more time by the water, whether it be biking, walking, or running, but because of the high volume of traffic, the speed of traffic, and the close proximity of the sidewalk to the road, we rarely utilize this wonderful harbor area. So that is how the residents weighed in on the 3A corridor. We asked specifically about the Rotary, and we asked which of the following statements best describes your opinion of the Route 3A Rotary in Hingham Harbor. And we gave respondents 4 options. The Rotary works as is, but could benefit from better signage. Number 2, the Rotary should be replaced with a signalized intersection. 3, the Rotary takes up too much waterfront space and should be replaced by a signalized intersection. And finally, 4, the Rotary takes up too much waterfront space, but I am open to a smaller roundabout that achieves the same traffic flow. Again, we pulled the data here for Hingham residents only, and the response were, if you combine number 1, the Rotary works as is, but could benefit from better signage, and number 4, the Rotary takes up too much waterfront space, but I'm open to a smaller roundabout, the response was 60.9% of Hingham residents support retaining the Rotary. When you add in all respondents, it jumps slightly to 63.9%, 63.8%. Some of the commentary was telling of the Rotary. The most frequent comments about the Rotary are illustrated in the first one. The Rotary works as is, but would work better if drivers actually knew how to properly enter and exit the roadway. So we've received many comments about people knowing how to navigate a Rotary. But there was, then the commentary was quite varied, including traffic engineers are best to determine this. I don't know what the answer is, but something needs to change. The Rotary is a death trap. And finally, a comment, I get the Rotary. It moves traffic well, but the current one is a free-for-all. Smaller, tighter, and free up more space for pedestrians on the harbor side. Pedestrians and bicyclists have no safe crossing with a Rotary. So that was very interesting data for us. We did discuss among ourselves, did people answer because it's what they know? And if we had given visuals of other options, such as a signalized intersection, would there be a different response? But it was very telling that 60% of the town population supports the Rotary. Next, we were going to go to question 12, which is, do concerns about safely crossing Route 3A, Rotary, and Summer Street currently keep you from utilizing existing harbor resources such as the Bathing Beach, Whitney Wharf, Lincoln Maritime, etc.? We broke this question down to abutters and non-abutters. And butters we defined as those coming from neighborhoods that align 3A or you must travel 3A to get to, including Otis Hill, Rockwood Road, Summer Street, World's End. And the interesting point here is that most respondents said no, safety concerns don't prevent me from crossing 3A to use the harbor. But it was interesting to see that abutters are 10% more concerned than not abutters about crossing this roadway. And some of the commentary was telling, including this here, well, I don't have concerns for myself. I do worry about the safety of my kids. Yes, it's like taking a death chance. We live close by. We never walk. My kids did HHS sailing and rowing. We drive them for fear of them being run over while walking to the harbor. No, I'm not concerned, but I can see why it would stop others. No, however, I've seen near misses in this area. There's a real need for improvements for access and safety of pedestrians, bikers, walkers, runners. So again, that was question 12, where we're trying to connect roadway issues with harbor use. Question 14 is where we move to focus on the harbor and harbor resources. And we asked, please rank the facilities and services you would like to see in a redeveloped Hingham Harbor on a scale of not important, 1 and 2, moderately important, 3, to most important, 4s and 5s. And like our concerns about Summer Street, Route 3A, we focused on the top 3. And we gave respondents everything from existing resources, such as Farmers Market, Lincoln Maritime, to dream resources, such as a bike path from Crow Point to World's End, an event space, a restaurant, a playground. And the top 3 resources that respondents would like to see, with 62%, was the Farmers Market, which currently exists. A second was a sidewalk or bike path from Crow Point to World's End. 60% of respondents listed this as most important. And a boardwalk along the waterfront, 52.8%. And perhaps that is a legacy because respondents had seen an image of boardwalks with the 2007, some of the schematic sketches from the 2007 Harbor Master Plan. But those were the top 3 priorities for residents in a redeveloped Hingham Harbor. And some of the commentary includes the following. Love the idea of a bike path, walk from Crow Point to World's End. I think that boardwalk, restaurants, playground, and even dog park would do wonders for the area. Water taxis from Hingham Shipyard would be great. Another comment, if you incorporate downtown Hingham with the waterfront, you don't need snack shacks on the water. Don't change the nature of the space. Enhance, not change. And finally, I think we have plenty of options for boaters. I like the idea of appealing to a broader base of folks. Love the idea of a restaurant, playground, bike path, super ideas. And then a final comment, which does get into more of a policy issue, is I think the waterfront belongs to everyone and brings out-of-towners to businesses. On the other hand, if they use the facilities and don't pay for maintenance, all the redevelopment could be costly to maintain. Maybe a small parking fee, like $5 for out-of-towners. As a Hingham resident, we can't go to anyone else's beach without a costly permit. So those were some of the many, many comments we got on question 14 for facilities in a redeveloped Hingham Harbor. As we mentioned, this is just the sheer quantity of commentary. General comments at the end of the survey, over 230 respondents took the time to enter paragraphs of feedback. Purpose for traveling 3A, why they were on 3A using the roadway, their opinion of the rotary gained a lot of feedback, and question 10, ranking the concerns for the traffic corridor. And then while the commentary was varied and all over the place, it does reveal and does show us that there's real passion for this area of town. So what next? As Chairman Reardon mentioned, Town Engineer Roger Fernandez will be presenting tonight on a simultaneous state study that was happening this year on Route 3A, Summer Street, and the George Washington Boulevard in Hingham and Hull that was conducted by the state's CTPS. And we will work with the town engineer as he recruits engineering services per Article 30 of last year's town meeting for safety improvements on the corridor. And we're hoping that engineering work paid for by the town will be informed by this citizens survey and the state study. And the selectmen will take up the CTPS study in January. So that's it for our survey feedback. And we welcome any questions or comments.
Roger, could you just hit the light behind you and turn the lights back on? And open the floor for questions, I guess, first from the committee.
First of all, I just want to thank Deirdre for her hard work and excellent job. Fabulous work by Deirdre. Unbelievable job.
Thank you.
So, committee members, some of this we've seen in the raw data since our subgroup worked with Fred Wiseman and Deirdre and Brian and I met. You know, some of this is new to you. Questions that you have before we go to the public?
The only, I mean, we've talked about this in committee, and I think that the work that Deidre's done, and Brian Knees, who's sick, by the way, just got a text that he's sick, I told the chairman, and the chairman has done, on a subcommittee basis, has been fantastic, working with Roger and working with Professor Wiseman, who's volunteered his time. My comment, my original comment, but there's not much we can do about it now, was that the Rotary is a particular concern, both spatially and traffic and safety-wise. But the area in front of the Lobster Pound is and many of the comments reflected this, is of equal concern. And since I think the largest number of people, or at least among the largest neighborhood contributors to the survey, were Crow Point and Otis Hill, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that even though the allocation of the $400,000 doesn't cover quite that far, that I would hope that the transportation planners give some consideration to, and I know, I'm not trying to creep this thing in every direction possible, but at least if you could get to the base of Otis Hill to the Lobster Pound turn, by linking those neighborhoods to the harbor in a safe manner, I think that's important for a lot of the people there. And but otherwise, everybody has the same agenda: linkage to the harbor, preserving the beauty of the harbor, but at the same time enhancing its accessibility. But I think it's just a great thing to get it kicked off, and I don't think it would have happened without Deidre. That's all.
So let me open the floor to questions from the public here. I'll mention, to whet your appetite, that Deirdre laid out the number of comments that came back. I think in total it was like 2,000 across the entire spectrum. Some questions generated, more commentary than others. I would say that when we first looked at the raw data, not recasting it as Professor Wiseman has helped us to do, to adjust for age and gender, we were impressed how diverse the opinions were, and that became clear. We had one member of the advisory committee who came to one of our meetings who warned us, in a sense, not to speak to commentary, because commentary isn't statistically valid, and that's true. And the numbers are what we really should focus on here, and the numbers are probably what will matter most to the planners from the Mass Department of Transportation. But nonetheless, we just felt as we were pulling this presentation together that to give some flavor, and Deirdre did a nice job in terms of drawing commentary across the spectrum. Some who were very, very critical, some were who were saying, look, we can deal. We've been doing this a long time. And some who were just kind of fine as we are. So it varied tremendously, and it did vary, although we didn't try to analyze it deeply by neighborhood. There was a little bit of that. There was more concern about safety the closer that you were to being in a butter to this roadway, and that's not a surprise. Those who live on Summer Street, those who watch stuff at the Rotary. The beauty of this is Roger's presentation is going to pick up and mirror a number of the things that are raised in this. But I do want to give everybody the opportunity to question. Yes?
So I just have a question about how you take the data and massage it so that it becomes more age and gender.
Deirdre, I'm going to suggest that we repeat the question so that the people at home hear it.
Thanks. Yes, the question was, how did Professor Wiseman massage the data to be representative of Hingham's actual population, age, and gender demographics? And he used a real estate website that in the town report, which had the town's actual population and our age and the breakdowns by age.
So he was able to cross that, Mary Ellen, and in a statistical way that frankly I don't completely understand, adjust so that you didn't have the imbalance of, well, you've got responses from 2/3 women, and you want to have something that's representative of the, you know, the entire population, which is in Hingham something like, wasn't it 51 or 52% women and 48% men, something on that order. So he's weight adjusting to get a representative sample for Hingham's gender and age.
So, by doing an online survey though, did you feel like you cut out people that might not have the ability to answer online? You know?
That definitely came up in our discussions in September at our HDC meeting. You know, someone asked, are we gonna do a print version? And our decision was no, because for the sheer task of tabulation and analysis, we weren't equipped to do that, and that this is really the best way to collect as much feedback as possible. But it is, you know, for instance, I think, let me just get the data. I think, is it 17% of our population in town, Bill, is over 75?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the actual population of 75 and older in Hingham currently. And the respondents, I think, in that age category were maybe 2 or 3% in the survey.
It's fairly small. So that was one of the weight adjustments.
That was one of the adjustments that, I mean, we adjusted across all board, but that's an example of how it was skewed because it was an online survey and why it was important to weight it.
And I think, Mary Ellen, you know, to go back again to the decision, and we were conscious of this. You're weighing the practicalities of wanting to be as inclusive as possible, but also, and we were unsure when we launched the study, would we have 200 respondents or would we have 1,500? To manually kind of get into a tabulation exercise with a volunteer committee and no staff, to use SurveyMonkey and the ability to manipulate the data from SurveyMonkey. You
As long
know,
as you can do it, that's why I just want to be able to explain it in the story, that's all.
my sense is that in today's world, those who either are on the internet on their phone or on a computer at home, even, you know, the elderly, many of the elderly spend, frankly, more time than some of those who are busier.
And
Amy,
it was
you had-
also, I just want to point out, Professor Weissman shared with us that when national surveys are conducted, for instance, in an election or whatever, they typically cap at 400 to 500 respondents. So he
Oh,
said we already knew we had enough respondents to get
So it's a good sample.
sample that was statistically valid.
But we wanted also to be able to say, for example, to the Mass Department of Transportation, look, we have a survey that reflects 10% of the voting population of the town. And that's a great result. Amy, you had your hand up.
More of a comment, actually. I can definitely understand why you wanted to make it more reflective of the entire Hingham population, especially for how the 3A corridor is used. I would just encourage us, when we look at the data of how the people want to use the harbor, I think we should also look at the people who responded, because I don't necessarily think that there could be a subsection of the Hingham population who use the harbor a lot more than the entire population, and I don't think that we should dilute those numbers, if that makes sense.
Comment from the audience, Amy Cowan, was that we should, well, it's important to weight the survey responses by town, age, and gender, that we should also not discount the actual respondents. And is there a difference in the that volume of usage of the harbor resources based on those who responded?
And the
As
answer,
an example, mostly women responded,
2/3.
2/3. I could see more women taking children down there during the day, during the week, that are home. I mean, those are things that we should pay attention to as well. So it's just a comment to look at them in a different way.
I think the committee took very much to heart, not just the statistical results, but realized that there was gold in the commentary, and that we really need to pay attention to the commentary. But I do have to share with you, it was quite diverse. It was quite across the spectrum.
I will pass around to the audience, and this will be posted online too. Question 14 about the harbor facilities. was broken down by age as to what various age groups wanted to see most. And what you'll see on this handout is, the top goes together in each category. And curiously, for 75 and older, the top resource people wanted to see was the Lincoln Maritime Center. And yet the top resource overall was 30, the category with the most responses was 35 to 44, with a farmer's market and a bike path and the items you saw in our presentation.
So Deirdre, I just wanted to ask you one thing about that Lincoln Maritime thing. Is that a surprise, or do you think people were answering based on what they might want to see that we don't have? I mean, I was surprised that that was so far down overall.
Not clear? One of the things about a survey is,
Yeah.
you get what you receive,
I was a little
and you have to deal with that. Sir, you had your hand up. Could I ask if those who are easily can get to a mic, please, if you just come up and just state your question so that those at home can hear it.
Not so much a question as a comment, but on the question about the safety of crossing Route 3, for the folks who live on the water street, on the water side of 3A, the way the question was worded was, does crossing 3A bother you or restrict your access to the water? So I answered no. I think that might be underrepresented because of the way it was worded.
Your point is that if you live, as I do, on the water side of Route 3A, you may have to cross it to get to the rest of town, and the same things are true. That's an interesting point. Alan?
Yes, Bill. One of the things I think is important is the segue to Roger speaking. That one of the most popular things is that continuous bikeway. Where was it? From Pro Point to
World's End.
To World's End. I think we have to look at the physical aspect of that. It's pretty obvious, but if you haven't walked it, I'd recommend, just for the heck of it, that people try to walk from Pro Point, past the rotary, even to Lincoln Maritime. And I don't think unless you've done it, and John Thomas has pointed this out a number of times himself, that you realize the difficulty and how perilous it is. Forget if you were in a baby carriage, it's nerve-rattling if you're my age walking there anyway. But I think we have to look at the physical aspect. How do you deal with it? So obviously it's not a survey question, but it's the segue into what Roger has. And will the state be open to that concept? That if you want a bikeway from Pro Point to World's End, we got some serious physical restrictions as far as how much room there is to begin with to do it.
Can I ask our HCAM representative whether that comment could be heard, given the way I faced the mic?
Yep, we heard.
It could be heard. Okay. So I'm not going to repeat, Alan, what you said. I think it's a point well taken. A good Sunday afternoon walk starts at the top of Martin's Lane or at Crow Point, and walk to Crow Point, and you get a sense of what the current situation is. I'm going to go for those who have not yet spoken.
Hi, thank you.
Go ahead.
I hope you hear this question. This also may be a segue to what Roger's going to speak to, about the survey results were helpful. They were telling. Clearly, we're going to direct what the town is prepared to do, but can someone speak to how we intend to attempt to use this data and potentially the commentary for what the state will do, being that this is a state road?
I think I'm going to defer the question because I think Roger may be able to better, or if we don't address it, please at the end when we open up to general questions, bring it up again, because there is a clear answer. Others that we haven't heard from. Paul, did you have your hand up again?
Just that, in between Deidre's, presentation and Roger's, and spinning off what our former chairman, Alan Peralt, said, we discussed in committee meetings the fact that the constituents and the respondents had various goals and agendas. Development, preservation, safety was an overriding concern. But we also discussed, and I think it's apparent to anybody looking at this board that Deidre was kind enough to provide for us tonight, that we and the other committees are going to be tackling this are faced with constraints. We're faced with, a state highway that surrounds, in arguably our most precious asset. So we're going to have to work with the selectmen, the conservation, planning, bathing beach committees, because we can't do this alone. The state's going to have a lot to say about it. What I'm getting at is what Alan touched on, that a lot of what people want and what we all want is, in a sense, mutually exclusive. So if you develop something, if you expand the Maritime Center, you may need more parking. If you have more parking, you may have less green. Even a bikeway or a walkway, that sounds great. And I'm a biker, and it's really scary riding along the sidewalk between the Lobster Pound and the beginning of the bathing beach, because if people are coming the other way, your only choice is to go off the curb into the state highway. Or into the harbor, I suppose. So what's the state going to do about that? What can the town do about it? How much green are you willing to give up for paved bikeways or gravel walkways? Should it be a consistent material? Is that possible? It's challenging. It's very challenging. There's no magic wand here. As the secretary, who couldn't be here tonight, Ed Morris, said when we kicked this discussion off, he had a very humorous comment that he said when he first sailed into Hingham Harbor before he moved here, he looked at the harbor and he said, "What a beautiful spot. You'd think you were in down East Maine." And he said, "Why would they have put this roadway surrounding the harbor?" But we're stuck with what they did in the 1920s and the 1930s with the state highway, and and the people in Situate, Cohasset, and Hull needed to get to where they're going. So we have a lot of challenges here. It's not going to be an easy process, and we need all the comments and advice from everybody in the audience and at home, and all the other committees and Roger's staff to figure this out.
I sense that that's an opportune segue into Roger's presentation. So I'm going to ask Roger Fernandez, town engineer, to come up and walk us through the report of the traffic study from the Division of the Mass Department of Transportation. Roger, you may want to turn that mic back around,
Or move it over there.
whichever way you'd like to. And if, Alan, could you hit that light right there? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, a couple of caveats. First, my name is not Chen Yun Wang, it's Roger Fernandez. Chen's a nice guy. He's a great guy. He was the lead representative from the MPO, which is an offset of that is the CTPS. You'll hear us say that quite a bit, the Central Transportation Planning Staff. And Chen presented this to us, the staff here, back in November. And what I'm going to show you is actually the draft. It's not in final form yet, and we're expecting to receive that. So in addition to this presentation, actually I sent something to Mary Ellen today. Deirdre and Bill have seen this, but again, it's in draft form. There's a written report that goes along with this, and at some point we'll put that on the town website for everyone to see. But basically, we submitted to the state, the CTPS, 2 years ago, or thereabouts, asking them to look at this corridor and help us sort of figure out what's going on there. The first time we asked, we were rejected. They told us no, and the reason why we were rejected is because the study itself, I like to think of it as a grant, it's worth about $110,000 paid for by the state. We were competing with about 30 to 38 other communities. So we went back again the following year, presented to them, spoke with them, did the best we could to sort of grease the skids, and the second time around they did consider the corridor worthy of the study. And as a happenstance, I got to meet Deirdre. She had put forward a petition article to help support the next phase of this, which will be the detail, the actual engineering work. This is not the engineering work. So what you're seeing here is not any final product by any stretch of the imagination, but the information that's provided here will help us develop that next phase. And you'll also see that and this is not always the case, but this actually sort of proves a lot of what the study, survey indicated. So anyway, So the objective was to identify safety, mobility, and when we say mobility, we mean vehicles, pedestrians, bicyclists. It's when you're designing in the state layout, the road belongs to MassDOT, as has been said here. You're required to consider all those things. It's a requirement. Access and other transportation-related problems in the corridor, and evaluate potential multimodal transportation solutions to the problem. So the limits of the work included Hull. And the reason why we included Hull in our application to the folks at the CTPS was to make this more than just a local project. The intent was to make this a regional one, and as a regional project, it made it more attractive to them and helped us, I think, get the study into play. I know that it was discussed here. Let me see if I got the right. Oh, wrong one. The laser here. But anyway, it was. We had. I got it now. Yep. We had. Thank you. We had talked about the limits of the work. The folks that talked about extending this over to Broad Cove, one of the problems with the first submission is we did include that, but as the project got larger, there was some apprehension on the part of the CTPS in terms of the overall size of the project. They had suggested that maybe we needed to make the project a little smaller so that they would be willing to take that on. In addition to that, there's some other constraints associated with this corner, including the culvert, and the fact that it sort of goes down to 2 lanes. So we didn't want to jeopardize the whole study just because of this one location. And ultimately, the next phase, and we'll talk about that in a minute, the design and eventually going for state funding to reconstruct that corridor. The larger you make the project, the more costly you make the project, the further you get to the back of the line in terms of actual funding. So it's not always good to go in with a huge, $15 million project. Sometimes you're better off trying to sort of pick that low-hanging fruit. But what they did agree to was to extend when we met with them, was to extend the limit of the study up to the entrance at the bathing beach, at that signalized entrance. So the signals work great. It's helpful to the farmers market. It functions as it should, but they're dated, and we wanted them to consider that signalized intersection as well. What we did, in addition to talking to them about the limits of the work, is we gave them sort of a data dump. We told them about everything that we knew about that was taking place along the corridor. That included the Lincoln Maritime Center, the Whitney Wharf Bridge, the potential bathhouse or rework, the work along the bathing beach with respect to the walls and all the investments, the walkways, everything that we knew was going to happen, had a potential for happening along this corridor. We provided them that information so they would consider that as part of their study. So some of these are going to be difficult to see, but that's okay. I'm going to do a good job trying to explain it, I hope. But one of the things that Hull had asked the folks doing the study was to consider mass transit, specifically bus routes. So there is a bus route, and that bus route is Route 714. It travels from Hingham Square up into Hull and Nantasket Beach, and the reason, I'm sorry? All the way to Pemberton? Okay. It continues up, and the reason why Hull brought that up is they had an interest in trying to, reduce the amount of actual folks driving on that road and promote mass transit. So they took a look at that, and the intent of the study was not to look at transit, but they graciously agreed to look at it in very short terms. And they found that, in general, the ridership on the bus isn't that great at any point. I think they had indicated to us that it's about 50% of what it should be, pretty regularly. But that was pretty much the limit of the look at mass transit with respect to the study. They also looked at the existing roadway and adjacent land use conditions on Summit Street and Summit Street in the residential area. And the main takeaway from this is, we've got these utility poles obstructing a lot of the sidewalk. The road width in general is 11-foot road width is okay. That's not the issue, but there's not a lot of there's not a large safety factor between each lane in opposite directions, and we'll look at the actual accident histories and what's taking place as a result. That'll come into play. So again, this is just a broad look at the cross section of the existing roadways. Same thing here, and it continued up and through George Washington Boulevard into Hull. One thing I'm going to do as part of this discussion is I'm not going to focus a lot on Hull, even though they're included in this report. Not that they're not important, but I'll try to go through those slides a little quicker than the others in here in Hingham. So the issues and concerns, they included high crashes at Route 3A, the Rotary, and North Street, high travel speeds, limited pedestrian access to Hingham Harbor. We just talked about that. Insufficient and substandard sidewalks, traffic congestion at Route 3A Rotary, lack of bicycle accommodations, insufficient roadway shoulders, summer traffic increases, and limited transit services to Nantasket Beach. So this diagram illustrates the daily traffic volumes. I'm going to have to open this here. I can't do that for you. And what they did, again, this will be on the website at some point. And what they did is they broke out sections of the rotary. So the numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, correspond to a location here along the corridor. So 1 would be this location, and at this location it illustrates that there's 11,800 cars headed north on Route 3A, and then conversely 11,650 cars headed south on Route 3A at this location. This is North Street, by the way. This is the Rotary, and as we head up, it's Summer Street. And so what the folks at the CTPS do is they physically measure the amount of cars that go over the road. The heaviest or most congested or most used section of the corridor was actually this section between the Rotary and North Street, where 15,000 in each direction respectively travel this section of roadway, and that's just daily traffic, not weekend traffic, not summer traffic. So what we asked them to do, and this is not atypical in traffic engineering, is we said, okay, that's great, but we want to look at the worst case scenario. It's not what you designed to, but we want to know how bad the summer Saturday traffic looks like. So on July 11th, 2015, between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., they did the same thing, and they looked at the traffic volumes between these same sections as denoted in the prior slide, and as you might imagine, the traffic volumes jumped. That section that was about 15 jumped up to 19,000 in each direction. The Rotary obviously became more congested. The other thing that was interesting is that ostensibly anybody that heads in this direction or heads south on Route 3A goes back the same direction. So the division between the traffic during the different periods of the day, whether it's summer, Saturdays, or weekday, if you head up that way, you come back that way, and you don't necessarily use Route 228 to do that. The next slide breaks down that traffic, and again, it looks at each individual intersection, and it begins to show us the prospective movements, which way these vehicles are turning when they head, for example, east. I'm sorry. In this case, it would actually be north on Water Street or North Street, and in which direction they travel. And that's important because it gives you a sense of destination and why they're going in that direction. So again, it's not easy to see here, but we will in a minute that North Street turns out to be one of the bypass roads, if you will, headed into Hull from those folks living west of the harbor. So if you live in Weymouth, if you live in locations near Weymouth, you will those folks tend to head up North Street, take a right towards the rotary, and head into Hull. Sure. They actually physically, somebody's out there and counts. And the counts were, it's difficult to see, but I'll tell you, there was one pedestrian crossed there during this time. In the AM, one pedestrian crossed this way in the PM. They were so small, it almost was inconsequential. So as you begin to delve into this, everything that this sort of study is saying in terms of how people get to the harbor and how they actually don't get to the harbor in terms of walking, it's sort of validated in the actual. And this is, and what this study does is, you know, it takes away some of the anecdotal stuff, and I know sometimes that's important to understand, but when it validates the anecdotal stuff, it's really interesting to see how that comes together. So again, very little pedestrian traffic. I won't bore you with the actual numbers, but busy section of road, not a lot of people crossing. Let's see here, make sure I'm caught up, figure 7. So, similar slide, summer, Saturday, what's happening at North Street, what's happening along this section, same situation. You were just seeing a tremendous increase, anywhere from 25 to 75% increase in traffic, depending on the section of road that we're talking about along this corridor, 25 to 75% increase. These are the bicycle volumes. Let me flip to that page. So, along this section, during the course of the day, we had 9 folks head up that way on bicycles and 13 folks this way. Headed into the rotary, as you might imagine, small amount, 3 and 14 headed out. So this diagram illustrates the use along this corridor with respect to bicycles.
Yeah, question. Sure. You said that the survey was taken from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Is that generally when it was?
For the Saturday, yes.
How about during the week?
7 to 9.
7 to 9. So,
Yeah.
So we got the rush hour traffic.
Right. So PM would be rush hour and AM would be rush hour, and then Saturday, assuming that folks are headed to the beach, that's what we selected in terms of worst case scenario. Okay. Okay. So weekday. We're back on weekdays. First, I'll call out this little legend here. One way to measure how well an intersection works is to look at what's called a level of service. The level of service tells you basically how long you have to wait at the light or how quickly the intersection is moving. I like to use the analogy, you know, how well the water is running through the hose. Is the hose too small? Not enough water is getting through it. So a level of service kind of measures that. And it's rated from A to F, A being it's working great. You know, the wait times are less than or equal to 10 seconds versus F, where you might be waiting out there for on signalized intersections more than 80 seconds. So as part of the study, the folks at the CTPS did the same thing. They broke down each individual intersection. And so, again, on a weekday peak hour analysis, they found that this intersection, the North Street intersection, worked okay, with exception to maybe the left-hand turns out and the left-hand turns in, where the level of services during the AM peaks were around a D. Now, it sounds not, the D might sound, you know, not that great or might sound poor, but most of us who drove on the road, were to drive through an intersection at the level of service D, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, I don't think. Conversely, what was interesting is Water Street functioned at a level of service A and B. So if folks headed into and out of Water Street, have no problem, seem to be moving right along. The folks that are headed to the lights seem to have the issue with respect to the level of service. The rotary itself, a D and F, primarily a D and F, coming into the rotary from Summer Street or coming into the rotary from Route 3A. Headed into the rotary from Summer Street, we this way we see level of service A, and B. Let's see. Just wanted to take a peek here. Look at some of the other locations. Yeah. So summer Saturday levels of service. I'm sorry?
The one at Martin's Lane and Summer Street.
World's End.
You want me to go back to the other slide?
No, I want to see what that level of service.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very bad one.
So, well, that's during the,
It's a very quick light. People go up through it all the time. Yeah.
so during the regular weekday peak hour, the level of service there ranges anywhere between a level of service A down to a level of service C, which isn't too bad, but let's take a look at Saturday. As you head out of Summer Street onto Rockland Street, or out of Martin Lane onto Summer Street or Rockland Street, it drops down to a level of service D on the weekends. So let me get to the right. Oh, that's the right one, yeah. So that's this one. You think it's worse? Yeah.
The people, that's a quick light coming up from,
Oh, okay.
and the people going up Summer and Rockland.
Yep.
Don't stop.
Right.
They wait, so we usually want to.
So the rotary really goes south in this model. The level of service at the rotary, headed into the rotary, falls to an E. Headed into the rotary from Route 3A falls to an F. And the North Street intersection here, the level of service making a left out of North Street onto Otis Street, or making a left from Summer Street onto North Street drops to an E and an F respectively. So that's a problematic location here during the summertime.
Folks look at the type of drivers who are driving on a Saturday versus the commuter traffic. Commuters know how to, who do it every day, know how to move the road.
Well, that's a good point, because when you get into that, and that's the other big thing with respect to the summer Saturday traffic. Those are transient sort of visitors. They're not there. They don't know the roads like the residents do, or even folks who might live in Hull regularly. And so you get that kind of behavior where the level of service as well as the accidents. But so the other thing that folks looked at was the speeds. If it's shown in red, then the speed limit is 35 miles an hour. But along this Summer Street section, the speeds on average were as high as 46 miles to 45 miles an hour, down through to the rotary, again 45, 43 miles an hour. The rotary itself was not a problem, but that's kind of intuitive. You can't go through a rotary doing 45 miles an hour. The speed limit here is 25. And then the speed limit, there weren't any major speed limit issues along this section, where the speed limit is 40 and folks are driving at about 40 miles an hour. This is one of the more telling sort of graphics. This is the incidence of accidents. So everywhere you see a red dot is a location where an accident or multiple accidents might have taken place. So again, they broke this down into a couple of sections, focusing in on Hingham. Section 1, there were 105 crashes, with 24 of those crashes resulting in injury. So that's a large percentage of folks getting hurt in a particular crash. If 25% of every person that gets into an accident at that location is resulting in some sort of an injury. The same is true as we look at the sort of the residential section coming out of the rotary. 56 crashes with 23 resulting in injury. So in that particular case, almost 1 out of every 2, a little less than 1 out of every 2 folks that get into an accident at that location results in an injury. That's not good. That's pretty bad, yeah.
What's the time period that they measured this by? 106 crashes?
5 years, yeah, yep.
And it only goes as far as North Street, it doesn't go up to the beach.
The accident reporting?
That's just.
Yeah, there were, actually, that's a good question. They did not, they were not able to indicate that there were any crashes at that location, at the bathing beach set of lights, which is another good indication of how well it works. Really, it is. I mean, it works well.
Roger, could
Yes,
you
sir.
go back just one slide?
Yes, sir.
What day of the week was one more, was the speed?
That's a good question. I'm not. It would have probably been the same. That's a good. You know what? I'm not going to speculate.
What time? It says 6/1 through 4/20.
Okay. Yeah. So that would have been the same. That would have been the same time where the regular weekday traffic was undertaken as well.
Weekday.
Yeah. Well, that period 7. Yeah, because we did the Saturday in July, so that would have been weekday. The Saturday work was done in July 11th.
So that's community,
Yes.
essentially.
Yes. And this was done in June. Yep. And thank you in front. So this is a crash diagram that sort of tells you what kind of crashes are taking place at these locations. We talked about the high amount of crashes that, high amount of injuries in comparison to crashes that have taken place along this section. Below you see the types of crashes, and in this particular case, you see a lot of those taking place where folks are taking left-hand turns onto North Street. This is a side swipe, this is a rear end, another side swipe. So, probably what happened here, someone's slowing down to make that left, this person tries to get over to the other lane, and he nails the next person next to them. Here, the squiggly line is just sort of out of control and hitting the person making that left. The 1 designation over the 1 underneath is an indication that that person resulted in an injury. And I heard someone say in the front, yes, somebody did get hit at that location. So there was an accident where someone was actually hit at that location. But it's interesting because you can kind of start looking at the diagram, and you don't have to be a traffic engineer to sort of say, well, this kind of makes sense in terms of the way that roadway is laid out and these types of crashes. The rotary, we talked about that a little bit, the sort of the confusion associated with it sometimes, and how some folks struggle understanding how to drive through a rotary. Most of the accidents here are side swipes, and that's probably a result of folks not getting in the right lane or not understanding what lane they need to get into, some rear ends, 1 pedestrian, and so again, same thing here, side swipe, but a lot of this is sort of intuitive. Most of the accidents within the rotary itself are minor in nature, but large in volume because of the difficulties folks have navigating it. Section of Summer Street, the residential section. Again, folks out of control and actually crossing the median. You can see them crossing the median at all these locations.
So they don't say alcohol.
Well, the report wouldn't, that was something they wouldn't be able to measure and tell us, but I know that that folks do regularly pick up bottles and cans that.
Is this just in general, or they don't say what time of day it was?
Well, the specifics would be in the actual accident report, but they don't in this particular study. So that information's available. And so what the CTPS folks do is they get all that information from the police department, Mass DOT, and it gives a lot more detail, but it's not shown here.
This is, again, over the 5-year period. So it's whenever the accident occurred in terms of time of day or.
Right. So again, this is a time.
This isn't really surprising, because we hear crashes all the time along this stretch. And when you hear that the average speed is 46 to foot and change,
Yep.
the average speed in a 35-mile-an-hour area, speed is the issue. Speed is the issue, and it's
And at 40
just a tremendously dangerous section.
And at 40 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, hitting someone, some oncoming traffic in two opposite directions, you can see where the accidents, the resulting accident versus injury ratio jumps. So if you get into an accident like this, and here you can see this indication, 2 folks were injured, 2 accidents. You get into an accident like this, somebody's getting injured. I mean, it's just, I don't see, I mean, it'd be very, very, so almost all of these, you can see where they cross the median, everyone's gotten injured. Everybody's gone off to the hospital.
Roger, where's Martin's Lane, if you would, with your pointer, and where's the rotary?
Further up.
I know they'd be off
to the right.
Off in both. Martin's would be
Rotary's down to the left.
And
Martin's Lane is off to your
the
right.
chart to the right. It's that middle stretch.
So here we start to get into George Washington Boulevard, where's Rockland Circle, so it gets a little bit of outside of where we're looking with respect to Hingham's interest. But interestingly enough, I will say this, that when we met with Hull and they sat in all these meetings with us and discussed the corridor as a whole, they've got a pretty safe road. If you look at the amount of accidents that they've had.
I disagree.
Well, and that's where that's where sort of the, with these guys, these traffic engineers are looking at this from the state. There's, at some point, they measure sort of, they listen to what folks are saying, but this is outside of any anecdotal stuff. So this is the actual result of their measurements.
Excuse me,
Yes, ma'am.
the potential for danger there is huge. I mean, people don't cross the street because they're risking their life.
People go from our condominium across the street to the medical center, and they drive there. There's no crosswalk, there's no.
So that was actually brought up at the meeting. So I don't. Okay. So I want to be careful not to speak for Hull, but the representatives for Hull were very cognizant of that, and pedestrians being able to cross, those kinds of features in the roadway to help that. So that was discussed, and it didn't go unnoticed. But again, I don't want to talk for Hull in this particular instance. So you're welcome. So what the CTPS also did was they looked at some short-term solutions. What can we do now? And we'll look at some long-terms in the next couple of slides. But so some proposed short-term solutions or improvements would include striping the rotary and channelizing the rotary itself, and then the entrance into the rotary with suitable paint and markings. They offer up a recommendation to maybe prohibit or limit between certain times of the day the left-hand turn access onto Water Street. Again, this is just their suggestion. This is not a design. This is something I would have to discuss. Offering up a couple yield signs at this right-hand turn, restriping some of the crosswalks that are poorly painted right now. So again, some additional signs entering the rotary, speed limit signs. Although, based on the speed limit analysis, we didn't see an issue with speeding. Yes, sir. Well, when to adjust the speed limit, you would require a speed study. And one thing you have to be careful of is the way that's calculated. It's based on the 85th percentile. So if the current speed limit there is, let's say, 40 miles an hour, which is not at the rotary, it's 25, but hypothetically at a location it's 40 miles an hour, and the 85th percentile of the speed through that corridor that's posted as 40 miles an hour is 50 miles an hour, guess what the new speed limit's going to be? it's going to be 50 miles an hour. So in that particular case, sometimes it's not always a good idea to sort of, just do a basic or just a generic speed study. Sometimes the best approach is to come up with some ways to mitigate the speed by changing the geometry, and we'll talk about that in a minute, or changing things so that folks, it promotes slower driving.
Roger, the convenience store gas station right at the Rotary that seemed to, come there within the last 10 years, that, it seems whenever there's gas is on sale or something, they back up right onto the Route 3A, heading just before the Rotary. It seems like the most inopportune place to have a backup onto a state highway. Was that addressed, or did it come up at all?
No, it's something we'd have to look at, yeah. So, in terms of long-term improvements, the CTPS folks were kind enough to look at a couple of different options. This is the signalized option. It considered access to the Lincoln Maritime Center. It considered the potential bridge, pedestrian bridge. It also added a wide, in this case they're calling for a 12-foot wide multi-use trail. With respect to the trail, the width, some of these things, when we pursue state funding, if they're outside the normal design guidelines, like a really wide multi-use sidewalks, they would be what we call the non-participating aspects of the project. So that means the town might have to pick up some or all the costs associated with doing some of that. But the reason for the wider sidewalk at 12 feet, it could be as little as 10. In order to accommodate both bicycle and pedestrian traffic, you have to have a minimum of a 10-foot wide sidewalk. They show the removal of the right-hand turn lane completely from that intersection. As a result of the study, I reached back out to them. To ask them what that would do to the level of service at this intersection. Would that affect the level of service? And their response was, no, it should be okay, Roger. We shouldn't have a problem if we got rid of that.
So everybody would have to stop at the light to turn right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep.
I was looking at by the downtown development a few years ago out there.
It was? Okay.
Somewhere, it's interesting to hear the level of service was back. That's what I heard whenever we bring it up.
Yeah.
Here, it isn't that bad.
Roger, if you do two things, if you block off Water Street coming from Hull, so you can't take the left either certain times a day or permanently on a short term or a long term, that means that people are going to go down and take a left and take another left in front of Tosca's to go, let's say they're going to the fruit center or somewhere else down Water Street. So if you do that, and in conjunction with that, you block off the just going right without stopping at the light where you have the yield sign right there. You block off that, no, back at North Street. If you do that and in conjunction block that off, you're creating a situation where you could have a backup back in front of Tosca's, and then the people that you've caused to not turn onto Water Street directly are coming all the way down to North Street to Stars, turning left, and they're not going to be able to get through the backup that you've created by doing the second thing, which is to block off the right turn without, stopping, without, you're going to yield, but you're not going to have to stop. Right. So we have to be careful to the degree that you have interplay with the state, about these little things. Overall, with their long-term proposals, do you think we could lose some green? They always say, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. The state's focus is on safety and transportation. Our focus is mixed. It's transportation, safety, and also green space. Is there a chance we could lose green space as a result of turning lanes or things like that?
Well, you would gain here, both in this scenario and the next scenario I was going to show you. The loss in terms of green would be the sidewalk or the bike, multi-use path.
Yeah, that wouldn't come out of the corridor, or the 3A corridor, come out of the green, right?
That would change things potentially. But other than that, not a lot. The only other thing that they show here that we're not going to do is widen this overpass. We want to promote folks heading over and crossing the pedestrian bridge. So that would be the only things that I see at this point. Yep.
Roger, can I ask you a quick question about the big pedestrian crossing in front of Red Eye Roasters there?
Okay.
Have they ever studied, like they do in downtown Boston, making, I don't know the correct term, but like a full stop where people can cross in all directions for pedestrians? Have they ever studied that here? At the same time,
So that all these pedestrian movements can happen at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah, as part of the It's likely that, not likely, it will be, the next phase, when this thing is actually designed, that's probably what will end up happening here. Yep. Yep.
Roger, why do you have the slide up? Would having a light at Water Street be an absolute non-starter because it's too close to one on North Street?
Yeah, it'd probably be too close. Yeah, a traffic light.
A traffic light,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking if they were, sequence, it was a blinking light during the day, kind of like Flosson Boulevard is.
Yeah.
But do you think it's probably a non-starter because of the proximity?
Because of the proximity. We ran into a similar situation on Derby Street and some of the quiet distance between the lights.
Roger, similar to that, what about a turning lane coming northbound from, with Hull in the rotary to your back? You're going to turn onto Water Street. Is there any chance of a turning lane, or is it too close to the North Street intersection?
Turning lane here?
Yeah, to get in, because sometimes it backs up there.
One of the issues we have along this corridor and ostensibly along the entire corridor is the right-of-way. It's very narrow.
It is, yeah.
And so one of the challenges is because ideally you'd love to be able to add a
Turning lane.
left-hand turning lane here.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that would solve that, provide some queuing. But the roadway right-of-way, which is not shown here, which is something we did ask for, but they didn't do for us, is going to be a challenge.
No turning lanes, yeah.
Can I interrupt for a minute? I want to ask our tech person whether you can hear Roger. I think the mic you may want to turn a little more toward you, Roger. And I would also ask that we be mindful, maybe let Roger get through the presentation and then hold our questions for a little bit, unless you have something that really is important right with what's up. I want to make sure there's time for questions at the end as well.
Oh, something tells me you can hear me fine, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Just being sure, it's
Sure,
important.
yeah. No problem. So, so this is sort of what that would look like, if you will, the wider sidewalk past the gas station. And it doesn't take into consideration what it would take in terms of land acquisition or to put this in place. But it's, it's a rendering to sort of demonstrate what could happen along this stretch. Just a little closer look at that signalized intersection. So the level of service between this intersection, the signalized intersection, and what's shown here, which is called a modern roundabout. It's
Nice.
no longer rotary.
I like that.
It's a modern roundabout. The level of service between the two options is close enough that it's sort of a pick 'em from what we were told.
Wow.
And the difference between this and the rotary is, the channeling of the traffic itself, the striping, the size is much smaller. This surface is constructed so that truck movements are able to drive over that if they need to. Excuse me. But this is not uncommon in Europe. Something we see very regularly other places around the world. Not so common here. Single lane roundabouts function excellently. If you're bored and you want to Google Federal Highway Administration, how single lane roundabouts work, it's going to be a very glowing report. 2-lane roundabouts also work fine, but there's just a little more movement within the.
It looks like you're creating 50% more green space, doubling the green space. Really, I mean, if you're eliminating that much pavement.
One of the challenges with this option versus this option is that there's actually, I think this is it. It's
Right
called
in the
a
middle.
perfuming station or gas, and this is the main line into Hull that serves Hull's gas needs. And so, we've already spoken to the folks at National Grid just to get a sort of order of magnitude in terms of how, how difficult it would be to move something like this. It's doable, but this option maybe provides a second option, which would be to maybe locate that in this green space.
Let's vote for that.
So.
Nice.
Again, proposed long-term improvement conceptual plan. As we head out of the rotary, the CTPS folks indicated to us that there is a potential, and bear in mind, this is something that MassDOT would have to buy into and other folks would have to buy into, but there is a potential to maybe reduce 2 lanes to 1 lane along Summer Street. When they ran their model, they found that there was, there was some congestion, there was a reduction in the level of service along the corridor, but they felt that the largest catalyst for the issue was the summer traffic. So if it's weekday, this would probably work okay, but once we get that summer traffic, we tend to trip what would be required for a second lane, sort of on paper. But this is something that we're going to have to look at in the next phase when we begin to develop the detail. Does it make sense to go from 2 lanes down to 1 lane? Is this something that MassDOT will buy into? And we just don't know yet, but it's something that's being considered.
Roger, question on the
Yeah.
2 lane versus 1 lane
Mhm.
on that section of Summer Street. Is there any study or is there any, let's say, theory or methodology about driver's speed when they have 2 lanes versus 1 lane on each side?
Not so much speed, but volumes. So when you get to 20,000 vehicles per day, that's usually the trigger for an additional lane. Yeah, 20,000.
This was coming down to 8,000.
Well, during the week. So when we get into the summer peak,
19,000.
up close to, we're over 20,000. So it's sort of, but close. And 228, Route 228 handles about the same amount of traffic. And when there's a stop on 228, traffic backs up very quickly, as you notice. But it does function. It works. And when school's in session, you get that traffic. So this becomes 2 things. One, it becomes something that if the town decided to go this direction, it becomes a policy question. If the town's on board with understanding that this will result potentially in some traffic from time to time. And then 2 would be getting MassDOT to potentially buy into this. What it does offer, though, which should be the most important thing, is safety. You end up with a green space or an island in between both of those, both of those lanes, which would mitigate that out of control folks driving into the oncoming traffic. So from a strictly safety standpoint, this would be great if that was the only.
My completely uneducated opinion is that when the drivers come down they hit those 2 lanes, not a lot of traffic, let's say weekdays, they hit the gas.
Yeah.
Because they have the 2 lanes, they think they've got the room, they can pass other cars.
Yeah.
Uneducated, but I feel that maybe if it was down to 1 lane, they wouldn't be as aggressive.
Well, and this is one of those traffic calming measures that we talked about. So I forgot who asked, but how do we adjust the speeds? Speed study or analysis is great. That's going to tell us what's wrong. But it's these kinds of measures that force people to slow down, and they will. It works. It will work.
Are you going to show us a option where you have a single lane rotary? Is that coming up?
No.
No.
I did ask the folks at the CTPS whether or not a single lane rotary option was available at the intersection of George Washington and Rockland Street. Again, the right-of-way, the amount of available public space was an issue, but the single lane rotary ended up not being able to handle the kind of capacity that we needed
Yeah.
based on the traffic volume.
I was thinking at the regular harbor rotary, if you have a single lane rotary in a sense, if you can't get a single lane going all the way up Summer Street towards George Washington Boulevard, and you had a single lane, so to speak, like the Situate style rotary where they come to one, everybody feeds in, they go to around one, then you would have a chance somewhere between Martin's Lane and the harbor rotary to narrow it down to 1. There'd be some optimum point in there to take the 2 lanes to 1. I think overall, it's gonna be a challenge to get them to do Summer Street all the way as 2, because you're going from 4 lanes of George Washington Boulevard down to 2.
Right.
But it might be possible somewhere from Martin's Lane to the rotary to get them into 1. And if they said, well, that's impossible, how do you do it on Route 3 South? On Route 3 South, going to the Sagamore Bridge, you go from 2 lanes to 1 and it works. We can't have more traffic than that area.
Paul, can I suggest,
Sorry, no, we can
you may want to see the Washington Boulevard stretch, because I think it'll answer the question. So
Thank you.
let's,
I haven't
again, let
seen
him conclude here.
So, well, Well, here's the George Washington Boulevard stretch that Bill had just mentioned. So,
Still 2 lanes,
yeah.
2 lanes?
one each way,
Oh, wow,
all the way to Hull.
wow. 2 lanes, right, Roger?
Yeah, and keep in mind, I continue to put this caveat out there that this cross-section with these widths are just conceptual. They're not based on any right-of-way or any lines that delineate what we have out here in terms of road widths. But you'll notice that automatically, you know, as part of any submission to MassDOT, we have to have bicycle accommodations as well as pedestrian accommodations. So you'll have, you know, a 5-foot sidewalk, 5-foot bike lane, or more, and in this case, I think that's an 11.5-foot travel lane. So that's a must. And you'll see that on Derby Street, by the way,
So you create a green island all the way down going toward Hull, right?
up to a point, yeah.
Most of that's green.
So here's another, again, just another cross-section, Summer Street in the harbor area, Summer Street in the residential area, some different options in terms of cross-sections. We can throw an anchor out there, that's no problem, that's free of charge as well. Rockland Street at George Washington Boulevard in Hingham. Again, concept cross-sections. And then George Washington Boulevard in Hull. Okay, let's see what we have here. Accommodations provide parking. I'll skip over this. Okay, yeah, the other sections would. So just the last thing I wanted to touch upon, and I know we're up. Well, actually, we did pretty good. In terms of process, the next thing that would need to happen and how this moves forward. So, you know, Deirdre and among others put forward that petition article. $400,000 has been appropriated at town meeting. We take the information that's in the CTPS report. It's useful information that then we can segue into the next phase, the $400,000. That money will start the detailed design process that we go through with MassDOT. So we as a town act as the proponents. We work with the consultant. We develop a design. There's a place for public discussion regarding the design as it moves forward. We submit that to MassDOT. Meanwhile, I head into Boston and try to lobby to sort of get this thing funded through the State Transportation Improvement Program. That takes a long, long time, years sometimes. However, the fact that this project was funded for the for a CTPS study means that federal money was allocated toward the project, which means that they probably want to see their own projects that were sort of looked at and studied actually come to fruition in terms of a project. So that puts us in a pretty good position. But just to set the expectations, this is a long process, and over the next couple of years, we will continue to discuss that. All right.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Roger, why don't you stay there? Alan, could you turn the lights back on? I want to thank Roger and the DPW generally, first for going after this grant to obtain this study. And I think you could tell from the comments on Roger's part, which are the state planner's observations and the observations coming out of the survey, that we're all on the same page. So these are very helpful from a connectivity standpoint. And Roy G. Russo, to respond to your question earlier, well, okay, how does this impact as we go forward? The fact that the state's own planning people, you know, have the crash statistics, they have the safety concerns, they have some ideas in terms of how those might be addressed, pick up the survey and many of the same things coming out. All of that feeds into, I think the word that Deirdre and I coined was that hopefully both of these inform the process of the engineering work that the town now might do once Roger and the selectmen have chosen an engineering firm to actually begin to plan out our response, and then most importantly, as Roger's explained, going then to the state for funding of the state portion of any project. But it is a long-term matter. So questions for Roger? Judith. Yes. Question, please.
Judith Hingham. I'm past chair of Hull's Sustainable Transportation Committee. I'm so deeply grateful to you. While we had that committee, through Bob Headland, we got bonding capacity for the State Highway Department to do that study. Both the Hingham and the Hull Selectmen voted separately in favor of getting it done. I'm absolutely delighted that you got it done. And what you were talking about going down to 2 lanes on George Washington Boulevard is exactly what we had in mind. And just to fill you in a little bit, when you talk about the number of bus riders on 714, when we did our survey in Hull, instead of asking the question of, do you ride the bus, we asked if we had frequent transit that was convenient, from early to late, would you take something? We had a picture of a little trolley. 40%. It just, if it's there, it makes a big difference if you've got some kind of really great transportation. That led me to look for electric rubber-wheeled trolleys. I found 3 in New Haven that they no longer wanted. If we could have gotten them for free, however, staffing them would have meant a person in every seat on every trip, probably traveling 12 miles an hour. So I went online and looked for sustainable transportation that could fill that wish for high level of transit. I found solar personal rapid transit, and I've been working on that since then. I'm working with people in Boston, Somerville, Cambridge, and would like to come back to your board here, Bill, and make a presentation so that people here could understand that as an option. What you're talking about here are all 20th century types of solutions, things that were invented 100 years ago. This is 21st century transportation that opens up a whole different way of looking at transportation. And it probably won't happen here first. You will have a chance to see it happen, maybe connecting Somerville and Cambridge or the Greenway and the Seaport. But I think it's not too early at all for Hull, Hingham, Weymouth, Quincy to be thinking about something going down 3A, something going down 3, that would make a total difference in your options here. And there are hardly any pedestrians, not too many bicyclists. If you got the people out of cars and into some really fantastic transit, you would have a pedestrian street. Can you imagine 3A as a pedestrian, bicyclist-friendly street with 2 lanes? It would be a whole different story. Okay.
Thank you, Judith. Judith had called me last week to want to spend a little bit of time explaining to me what this option might be, and we were online to some materials that describe that, and I will hold out to you, Judith. We will schedule something. The other issue will be that you might well want, because understand from the perspective of the town, the approval of the engineering study and the going forward, does ultimately reside with the selectmen. We are advisory, but we are a vehicle for this kind of discussion as well. Amy, you had your hand up as well.
I did, and Roger, I certainly don't want to take away from all the excellent work and the important work for the Rotary and Summer Street and safety being a huge concern that needs to be addressed. My feeling and passion is also how to get people to the harbor, and so extending this up to the lobster pound like Paul and Alan mentioned, what do we have to do? I know it wasn't considered in this first study, but when we say connect Crow Point, it's way beyond connecting Crow Point, because I can see the Wampatuck area and Bradley Woods and the shipyard, all of those people, if we fixed that corner for pedestrian access, it could make a tremendous difference for how people get to and use our water. So I know that this could take years to do what we've already talked about, and I don't want to wait until this is finished before we then address that. So please just tell us how you think, what we can do as a community to get that portion of 3A looked at?
Yeah, I don't think that doing this work jeopardizes that objective. I think that they can happen in parallel. I think the only point of this my point in bringing that up in terms of the limits and why we went to those limits is you jeopardize everything by making it too big. And to be frank, from the folks at the CTPS, our original submission included that location. And they came back to me and said, Roger, that's all well and good, but it's too big. We can't take this all on. So we sort of shifted gears and came back the following year with a smaller project. But that doesn't mean we can't go forward and request a secondary project that's sort of just right behind this one or running in parallel with this one, so.
And how do we do that?
Well, it would be the same process that we went through with this one. It would be, petitioning the folks at the MPO, working with the MAPC, meeting with them, telling them that, we've got this section underway. Let's go ahead and start to sort of look at that next section right away.
So I think, Amy, I'm a resident of Otis Hill, so I share your concerns. But the more I listen to the presentations and the more I realize that this train is leaving the station, rather than trying to tack onto it, I think we should watch them go, support them, and learn from them. So that if another citizen's petition is needed to raise a little more money to study that section from the bathing beach just past the lobster pound area, which is of critical concern, so be it. And I think that what they decide to do here, both on a state and a local level, will, in a way, pave the way for that. So I think it'll be less of more of a learning curve that we'll be able to take advantage of. But I think that they work together.
Alan Peralt?
Segue to that question, Roger, the 400,000 the town meeting funded, how much is the actual state done that we might have done under 400? Do we get any bang out of them that we would have been doing ourselves? And to Amy's point, could some of our 400,000 be used to look at some of those things, like the bikeway or whatever, getting out to Otis Street and beyond?
We have, we've put a request for qualifications / proposals out already. So I've debriefed a couple of consultants. I've actually received one packet already. And so when we receive these packets, we're going to see what the fee is associated with doing that work from those respective folks, and then see if there's any money left over to look at something like that. I think in the appropriation, I don't think that there was any language that would preclude the town from using it as long as it was along that corridor. But we have to see what out of that 400,000 is left to do more. I can tell you that it's even if there was some money left, there was some funds available as a result of that, it wouldn't provide the kind of detail that you just saw in this, because this what you just saw today is about $110,000 worth of work, to give you sort of an order of magnitude.
So you're saying, Roger, we need another 100,000 to kind of see that area up to the lobster pound?
Well, it might be less than that because there's not so many intersections, so it's not so complicated. But it wouldn't. It's not like a $5,000 or $10,000 sort of undertaking. It would be, to get this kind of level of detail, it would be a substantive amount of money.
Tom Coveney?
Yeah, quick question. So from a wow factor with the state, how does this road stack up with other roads around the state saying this is overly populated with transportation, et cetera, versus, some other corridors around the state? I mean, were they?
Well, the folks we work with strictly deal with the technical aspects, the studies and the traffic engineering stuff. But we will be competing for funding with the other folks that are in the Boston MPO. So, and by the way, Boston is in that region, so that's the big guy sort of in the room. So what ends up happening is we try to get the project as ready as we can. I do my part in sort of communicating to that staff, and so where this might fit on their priority list will depend greatly on how ready we are and what else is being asked for.
You had that scale before A to F. Is this a D, C?
Compared to what though?
Compared to other,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I'm not familiar with other sort of priorities around the not in the Commonwealth, within just the Boston MPO. So But where Hingham has an advantage is a lot of communities who put forward projects like this can't necessarily fund the full design. So coming up with $400,000 is a huge undertaking. So sometimes towns take 10 years to get a project moved along like this. We got Derby Street, for example, moved along in a little over 2 years, which is light speed. And a large part of that has to do with, sort of working with the right folks, but also being able to fully fund the design and permitting associated with the project. So that goes back to our readiness, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
But difficult to say. I don't know what other towns are submitting or other region, between Boston and PO.
When you, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, other questions from the audience? Paul?
Comment on the rotary projection. I'm not going to ask you to bring it back up, but we noticed that you'll be getting rid of about half of the pavement and creating, obviously moving it away from the harbor. But there was a part of what you were creating, or they were creating, a state, in shrinking the rotary, was they were creating a dead space between the gas station that's right on the rotary and the new rotary that's smaller. And if you could convince them somewhere along the line, if they do go with the rotary as opposed to signalized intersection, which I sort of like the rotary, but if you went with that option, if you could get them to shift it back towards that gas station and away from the water, you create even more very valuable green space. Because we know that anytime this committee's been involved, even tangentially, in acquiring waterfront sites, the prices always seems to be have $1 million or more before it. So when you create that black area down at the bottom, that in a sense becomes a dead space. To the degree that you can shift the entire process away from the harbor, you then create more green down there. That creates a very large contiguous green area from the sailing center, rowing center, back towards the rest of the green space that we control. So it's just the state doesn't care, but we would care a lot about moving it in that direction. And my only other comment, as long as we're getting, is and the lady from Hull, who was the former chairman of their transportation group, whether it's you talking to the state or us thinking about it in our next meeting, and I know this will come up at another meeting, and when Roger said that the ridership wasn't quite what you needed to get a full bus, so to speak, servicing Hull, I've always wondered why, and maybe this is something to explore, why they didn't have one of those smaller buses that did link things the way they do in Switzerland, where you tie the boat and the train and everything together. So you just have it sort of one bus, whether it's gas or electric or, God forbid, gasoline, but whatever it is, it just makes a continuous route from Nantasket to Nantasket Junction to the Hingham waterfront where it presently stops. The Hull buses and things stop, to the degree that they run, stop down in the Hingham waterfront, Hingham downtown, the West Hingham train station, back to Hingham Harbor, and then back to Nantasket. Why wouldn't the continuance run? If people wanted to go to the beach, they can go to the beach. If they want to go shopping, they can go shopping. If they want to hop on a train, they can hop on a train. It seems to me the options of flexibility might make up for the lack of ridership, because if people knew every 15 minutes the same bus was coming around the bend, so to speak, or every hour, they could plan their days accordingly. And if part of lowering the amount of traffic is not just shrinking rotaries, but creating viable alternatives, I'm not sure why, when you come back to us, why some discussion along those lines might not be helpful. And I know they cross lines between town to town, but...
Well, and I think, Roger, you could clarify for us, talking about crossing lines between Mass DOT on the one hand and MBTA on the other, because the MBTA are the providers of the transit. Not necessarily only. I mean, there are some cases where towns, underwrite small, those kind of small circular routes. But to me, it's a little bit of apples and oranges. But Roger, you could probably answer that.
No, I couldn't. I don't think I could add much more to that. It's exactly right. So even the folks at the CTPS were somewhat reluctant to sort of weigh very heavily on the MBTA stuff, because it's another agency.
Different.
Yeah. But they were able to gather some information, but that was a phone call, but other than that, a different situation.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick one, a little off topic, but it came up a couple of times. Could you speak briefly to the status of the pedestrian bridge?
Over Route 3A?
No, the one that's already.
The Whitney
Oh,
Wharf
yes.
Bridge.
Bill?
Oh, okay.
Bill, or you?
Yeah, so the, don't know if you're aware, but the project was bid out. We have a contractor in hand, and the work is scheduled to take place in very early spring. Yep.
Roy?
Just a comment, maybe a closing comment, but and maybe this is a caution.
Yes, Counselor.
Maybe this is a caution, but I would hope that this committee would recognize that the only reason why we have the traction that we do and within the town and within the state is for safety. It's the numbers that you saw, the traffic, the numbers, the accident numbers, those reports, that's what is getting us to the top. There are, and what we did in town meeting, that's what got us the money for it's safety. We're trying to save lives. As someone who lives along this corridor, that's why Deidre's been doing, that's what we've all been doing. We're so appreciative of what this committee's doing. There are a lot of ancillary benefits for the design, but the primary goal of the design is for safety. So I'm just a little bit worried when I hear the comments that green space is important. Well, I get it, and your comments about shifting the rotary, that's a helpful comment, I think. Access is extremely important, especially to this jewel of a harbor. But I don't want any of those ancillary goals to get in the way of the primary goal, which is to prevent people from getting killed. So if the committee can work with that in mind,
Well, I'd just share my perspective, Roy, that I think the reason why Roger said the state chose to look at this corridor rather than the 20 other projects that might have is because the accident statistics have begun to accumulate. And what's absolutely telling in the CTPS study is even though the highest volume of accidents is North Street, or is the rotary to North Street, the numbers are, roughly 1 in 3 result in personal injury. Whereas, for example, if you get up onto Summer Street, it's 1 in 2. That every other accident is personal injury. So in terms of the Summer Street corridor, true confessions here, I've lived in that neighborhood since 1956. And we who live there know in the summer when you hear the screech of brakes that there's yet been another car that's gone out of control. So all of that I think is very visible, but I would agree, and I think the state is mindful of, now they've got their own planners saying, this is an issue. And those statistics are exactly that. They are statistics. And with that you can begin to put some pressure to bear. But it's still a time-consuming process.
But has the committee prioritized the objectives in that order? Safety first, and then green space, and then service, important but not anywhere near that. As you go through your thought process, I would think there would be, whether you've stated that or you've written it someplace, do you have a prioritization, or is it like you have 3 priorities? Are they all equal?
Well,
I think that's an important determination to make.
It is incumbent on this committee to oversee and urge. Ultimately, as I emphasized earlier, the selectmen will enter into the contracts with the engineers who are going to design, this roadway solution. I don't know, from Roger's perspective, for example, if we were to look to the other most recent effort that went on in town, was the Derby Street corridor, was there a set of priorities that were 1, 2, 3? I'm not sure. Here, it seems obvious that safety should be first, but I have to defer ultimately to the transportation planners and to our selectmen to urge that those priorities be observed. Roger, do you want to add anything? Because I
think that I don't know that it needs to be written down, Tom, but I mean, shame on anybody who puts something else before safety. That's not, we're not, in that instance, I will definitely give my opinion very loudly. Safety's got to be the first thing in terms of anything that we do. So but it's a good point. It's a good point.
Judith?
The tail wagging the dog. No, it's okay, I'm sorry.
Having talked with Sean Falzer, who's the head of the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP program that puts, gives priorities to who gets funded, safety is the number one thing in every discussion that they have.
Helpful, I think.
Yep, good point.
Well, look, at 2 minutes of 9, I think the principal objectives of our meeting in terms of the presentation context has occurred. We still have other business. You are certainly welcome to remain. But I think in terms of the transportation issues and the survey at this juncture, we'll bring this to a closure. I do want to emphasize to those at home that to the extent that you have friends and neighbors who might have wanted to have come to this meeting, and to those in the room, let them know that it will be broadcast. You can go onto the town website, look for the Harbor Development Committee and meetings, and follow the trail, and you will get to the film that I think I was told would be up somewhere in the 24 to 48 hour time frame. So thank you all personally for coming, and as I said, stay if you'd like. So, committee members. And Alan and Chris, if you'd like to come up and join us.
This still being filmed?
Yes.
Taking a break?
No, we're not taking a break. So we're still being filmed live, and we're on the mic, so I could ask folks to gather.
I sent you an email with questions. Tomorrow's fine.
So let us go back to the beginning of our agenda. I know Alan and Chris are here representing the bathing beach, and there are some conversations that we want to get to on their matters involving some of the bathing beach construction. We'll cover that under update on construction projects. Can we go back and address the minutes? We have 2 sets of minutes. The first are from October 22nd. We did not approve these at our last meeting because we really didn't have enough of representation from those who had actually been at the meeting. These were drafted by Ed originally. I made some edits and forwarded it to all of you. This afternoon, I had remembered that Ken Corson had written me prior to the minutes going out saying, hey, there's something that I don't think got reflected, and he asked that we include certain additional comments. I have a couple of copies of that have been on the table. I asked the committee members to take a brief look through the red portions. Tom, you got a chance to look at this?
I was at the meeting, let's see, with the, when Ken wanted to suggest the changes?
Yeah, these are changes that, no, they're not changes. They're Ken verbalizing and wanting to include in the minutes some thoughts that he had with respect to the engineering work to be done by Beals and Thomas on the wharfs. And Roger, here, let me share a
Well,
copy.
it's not specifically just for the engineering work, but it's just the concept of whoever's doing, it doesn't matter who's doing the engineering work. It's
Right.
just the concept of what I think we need to be thinking about.
The-
And it wasn't reflected in the minutes, and I just think it's probably important that it get reflected in there, but not so much that it be reflected there, but we actually consider it
Yeah.
as we move forward.
I think the degree that we should consider it is large, and overwhelming. I think to the degree that something like that needs to be reflected in the minutes, in one of our meetings that I don't think you were able to make, we had a discussion about the brevity or the length of meeting minutes, and the chairman was coming down on the side of the meeting minutes should be descriptive enough so that we know what went on, but not really a blow-by-blow. To some degree, this is getting into a blow-by-blow, but
Ken and I had that conversation
having
this
said,
afternoon.
having said that, and in deferring to your assistance to this committee on various times, and being that it begins, Ken Corson added that, I'm prepared to vote verbatim what you've written, with the caveat that going forward, I think that the meeting minutes should be a little less of the entire argument and more just of the overall topic and what was discussed.
When I spoke with Ken this afternoon, after he had shared this with me, my only suggestion had been that we literally, in this instance, pick up, and I'll give this to Ed, our clerk, and put quotes around these comments of Ken's part, so that I didn't want, for example, the ending phrases to say there's a lot of money out there and we should pursue that. That was not a discussion that.
There's only two ways to approach this. One is to edit it, which we don't have the time to do. 2 is to put quotes around it, and 3 is to defer it. Since they're already deferred from October, I'd say we get a vote, put the quotes around it, and move on. That's my suggestion.
And at the same time, if you want, like to take off that last line, that could be a little editorial. I'm completely fine with that. I just want to make sure that I get the substance in. And when I put this down there, I was just at the office saying, okay, quick, I got to put my thoughts down. It wasn't that it had to be in there in that same phrase, but I just wanted to make sure we
I want to point
get
out,
it in.
he also had comments on the second page. This had to do much more with the security system, and he was just clarifying the facts. And,
Yes.
And I think it is clear, and again, it is useful. This has to do with the security system that he described to us briefly, cameras, both
Right.
a Hingham system and the part of the East Coast.
Yeah,
Correct.
I have no comments on that. That's
I was fine with all of that.
what you might
So I
suspect.
think I have a motion from Paul to adopt these minutes as amended with the quotes, and I'll give you the 2 quotes there and quotes there. And,
Okay. We're gonna remove the last.
Yeah, you can take out the last line. That's probably too editorial.
eligible for grants, close and drop out. There is a motion, do I have a
So
second?
moved.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye? Okay. Can we move to, I think, a much more straightforward set of minutes? These are for November 3rd. Eric was kind enough to take these for us in Ed's absence. He drafted them initially. I made some relatively minor edits, Eric, just I think factual. Is everyone, these went out earlier. Anyone have questions on these? If not,
I didn't have any comments.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of November 3rd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of, what was the date, October what?
November 3rd.
November 3rd?
Is there a second? Further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we are then on, in our agenda, to item 3. Actually, item 4, excuse me. Update on harbor construction projects. I wanted to include in that 2 items. One, just to elaborate a little bit further on the Whitney Wharf Bridge. Roger and I spoke late this afternoon just to have me be current. I reported when we met on November 3rd that the chair was pretty frustrated as project manager for this project that we are not in a better position vis-a-vis our contractor York Bridge Concepts. They had some difficulties and could not, get this project started this fall as had been contemplated. Roger has been working with Eric Loss at Bills and Thomas to go back to the contractor, deal with the obvious fact that we're not where they expected to be, but to begin to put in more teeth, I'll say, in terms of, what's the term, mitigate? Change order. A change order, and potentially liquidated damages. There's a bit of, as you might expect, some negotiation going back and forth. Bottom line is, they are contracted to do this, they are obligated to do that, and it's a question of the time and the circumstances under which, and we'll continue to work on it.
If you can get them in and out of there in early spring and get them essentially done in late May or mid-May, then there's no harm, no foul with the delay, because the active time that people want to use the harbor hasn't been impacted. But if they let you down on the back end, as they have on the front end, and we straddle into the summer season, and there's more disruption of people's use of that area, then there
Well,
would be a
and
potential. for
particularly, and Roger is well aware of this, and I'm just acknowledging it, we have a party who has given us an easement to, construct across his property, and to the extent that we get into his season, which is earlier than, the
Springtime.
boaters' season.
Getting his moorings in.
So, that's why it's important that we continue to work that. Roger and Eric Loss are working this hard, and we will continue to, and your chairman will continue to do the same.
What's their excuse? Why aren't they?
Roger, do you want to?
What's their reasoning? They delayed?
The original delay was as simple as they had
Schedule.
probably overreached in their schedule. They're probably working somewhere else, or they had something else come up, and so they've tried to find every reason why they couldn't make it here this fall, which I think I would have appreciated them just saying that earlier on, so that we wouldn't continue to come back and say 4 more weeks, 4 more weeks, 4 more weeks. So we kind of, got that from them, and the schedule has slipped such that, they're not gonna be working on a bridge in the middle of January, although this year
They could have.
for the 16 degrees, they could
Don't
be
know.
here. So I think they just basically overextended themselves.
Okay, let's, so that's where that stands.
One question on that? Because I know you know more about CPC, and actually Bill does as well. But assuming on your lighting budget, right, the CPC, let's say that gets voted by town meeting. Is there any advantage of the fact that by the time they're doing work, that the lighting could be done more concurrently?
Let us get there first.
Okay.
The next step, as you probably know, because you're
Yeah.
involved as well, is CPC has a meeting on January 7th, and this committee needs to make its final pitch for why the lighting grant should be allowed. I frankly expect there will be some conversation about, well, tell us about where this project stands. And I think that's incumbent on them to do that, as they have each time we've met with them in the past. So, we need to make sure that the project is proceeding, but you're absolutely correct. It would make it possible to do it, all, probably virtually at the same time.
Because the money becomes available once it's voted. is it
Correct.
not? Right.
For CPC, it's the day of the annual meeting, or the day after the annual meeting. So the other project that is going forward, and the parties are in the room to tell us about that, and that is the bathing beach. Those in the audience at home may remember that another warrant article, in addition to Article 30, was the Article 31 article that dealt with both the survey and engineering plans for our town wharfs. But the larger portion, some $670,000, was for work at the bathing beach to address the parking lot and the sand issue that we've been struggling with for many years. Alan Peralta, as chairman of the Bathing Beach Trustees, can update us on that project, which is proceeding. And then there are some discussions that we want to have around that project.
Right.
Do you need a microphone? What do you think?
Yeah, why don't we shift one of those? Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. The trustees met last Thursday. Actually, we met at DPW because we wanted to meet with Harry and Sylvester and Roger on this issue, because a lot of the work we're doing is dovetail with them, and their office is the one that's overseeing the engineering for us and working with the engineer. Roger can speak to it. We're actually, not dissimilar to you, a little behind schedule, I think, and it may almost be somewhat intentional, I guess, at this point. We've thought, given when this job was actually awarded, to go in and do too much of the beach restoration work before we go into the winter where we have our worst storms. We're a little behind schedule, I think it's fair to say, on the wall, as far as getting on the same page as they are as far as the block order and get the precast being done, Bill, so that's probably not dissimilar to our project, a little behind. I don't think that work can be done, assuming we don't have, the late January and February we had this past year, because, cutting into the lot is not that big a deal. So I think we can make up time more easily because we don't get action out there until, Memorial Day. I think the more pressing thing that we have, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Roger, everything's been lined out, and we know where the center lines are, and we know where the parking lot's going to be adjusted, so that's fine. The thing I think we have to work collectively with you on, and that's the main thing that Chris and Ed and myself talked with Roger about, is how do we accommodate the farmer's market? Because I think, as you all know, they kind of used that extra area. It may not have been striped off as parking spaces, but they were kind of creative, I will say, as far as where they could occasionally park some other cars, so that while we had the beach open and they were open at the same time on a Saturday from 10 to 2, we didn't, by narrowing this asphalt, how much do we restrict them? And we kind of agreed when we were working with them and they were commenting on going through the approval process that we would do that. And I think to do so, we really need to work with this committee and the Board of Selectmen. Maybe we start looking at the Selectmen's parcel, where we suddenly get to the gazebo parcel. Can anything be done there? Roger's already going to, Roger can probably add to this, but might even look, can we park some of the vehicles over the swale? Maybe small vehicles, or do a lineup of smaller cars in that area, you know, where they can park maybe 10 or 15 cars, you know, on the other side of the swale if they could be accessed. So I'll let Roger speak to that. He's going to potentially look at that, but I think we're going to have to collectively meet, and that'll be an issue of how do we do that, because as Deirdre knows, it's that survey. So
Well,
that's
this
one of the most precious things that people see.
From Mark Cullings as
Correct.
the what's his title? Director of the farmers market,
I
or
believe, or president, I think, yeah.
has raised it, saying that Lucky has some concerns. Their season has shut down, but
Yep.
they target, is it Memorial Day for a start?
It's actually earlier. They started later because it's April, and it doesn't gear up to the full-blown farmers market, but they start in April. So our window for doing this is the next few months. You know, I know he's eager, and you and I have talked about it, Bill, but I think Roger's willing to kind of look at, we started the ball rolling on that the other day, because we know as trustees, we have to look at that. I don't know if Chris wants to add anything to it, but, because he met with Mark as well.
Yeah, that was my first meeting with Mark. That was his primary concern, is the loss of a few parking spots. I mean, we checked against our contract with the farmer's market, and we're honoring the contract by giving them the parking spots that they are contractually obligated, but these are kind of a bit of the overflow. But we want to keep them whole, basically. We have to adjust the parking lot and work on the beach, but we want to make sure they still have the same access.
And I think, as most of the Harbor Development Committee knows, the Bathing Beach trustees have a CPC article in as well. For we've been working with Roger on this one as well. The idea of, you know, not doing the Tom Sawyer approach, as Paul said. We tried the Tom Sawyer approach in the bathhouse to get someone else to build it and whatever, and we'd lease it out. We're looking at the idea of building our own building. And the first thing is a proof of concept, and we've even talked about the idea, does it have to be in the trustees parcel? You know, could you look at the selectmen's parcel and have it water side of the gazebo? There's a couple of, you know, we want to keep everything out there. That means even more so we have to work with the Harbor Development Committee. That gets it as close to the boat ramp as it is to the bathing beach. It gets it closer to utilities, because the gas line is closer. Well, the gas line's about the same, the sewer line's closer.
Sure.
So I think there's a lot of things the things we're working on really need to integrate with the Harbor Development Committee, and much so with Roger.
Well, one thing we talked about it we'll be able to do is start to look at this a little more holistically. So we're going to prepare sort of a concept plan that shows potential location of the new building, the walkways, potential parking that would provide the needed space for the farmer's market, and actually put that on a piece of paper so that folks can sort of see it, and then maybe even present that, since the property's on the selectmen's parcel, present that to the selectmen at some point. So there's engineering money there that can allow us to sort of start to develop some of those concept
In
plans.
this part of Alan's presentation, is there any discussion to just rebuilding a bathhouse where it is, or a bathhouse on the bandstand parcel without a snack component?
The only thing is, Roger has filed a grant application with the state, with whatever Seaport is today. I don't know what they call it.
Economic Council.
Economic development.
And we need, as Kenny's always found with Seaport, there has to be some commercial component to these things to get it. And you've got a fairly positive letter from them a month or so ago, that for maybe next year's funding, you know, they may look at it favorably. We're not gonna get something this winter or this spring, but it's one they're considering. And it's actually Carol Piles who had the idea of saying, why are you married to it in that one location? And it kind of was like dawned on me. I was trying to think, yeah, of all people, shouldn't just tend to think of it that way. We should start thinking, where could it be? Because I know the economics of the utilities were a big reason Sullivan's backed out, you know, and
So what alternative location would be better for the
it
utilities?
might be, if it was in front of the gazebo, or near the gazebo on the selectmen's parcel. Again, we're not saying that's cast in stone, but like Roger's saying, first thing really should be proof of concept. You know, we look at the engineering issues, look at the parking issues, look at who uses it. As I mentioned, you know, be close to the boat ramp. I mean, there's, you know, we don't have restrooms there either.
And
you
we've
know?
talked about that for years around the harbor. We have a harbor full of boats, and we don't have public restrooms there.
No.
Right? And, you know, if it was in the middle, it would be equidistant between the two parking
Yeah.
lots. You know, I think this, I've mentioned to Ted Alexiata, so he's aware of the concept, you know,
And open to thinking about it.
correct, you know, and,
Clear.
yeah, there may be cons to it as well, but I think the idea is we're clearly getting out of what's technically trustee property and really getting into, but like Roger said, we should look at this holistically.
Alan, who controls that sliver of green behind your parking lot, between 3A and your parking lot? The kind of, it's part of the bandstand parcel green
That's
one.
this. Well,
Yours? Does the line go straight?
But we go right to here.
So you control that small
Correct.
green.
And Roger's looking at maybe the parking, we might be able to accommodate some parking in that green space for the
Well,
farmer's market.
Or the little bathhouse itself.
Yeah.
You'd have to drain it better, but.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that there's a few things you have to look at. There's a lot of moving parts there, but the first thing is to look at it from a concept point of view, you know.
Can I, Paul, because you were kind of amplifying, the original conversation was really the farmer's market and the parking there. Can I just ask, are you contemplating that Roger would do some initial kind of work, and then would it make sense to have a joint meeting with the farmer's market representatives, your committee and our committee?
Yeah.
Again, a case where the two committees should be working together.
Yeah, and I didn't want to meld those two things too much. Part of our money that is going before CPC is proof of concept money. So that work is probably going to be behind the farmer's market. The farmer's market's a pressing thing. They want to open sometime in April. We've got to figure this thing out sooner.
Yep.
But then we get into the bathhouse thing. Well, that's a restroom that's available for them as well, instead of the porta-johns they use. I mean, I think they all interplay with each other. Sequentially, though, we really get on the farmer's market one soon. And I know Mark
parking.
wants to do it soon,
The parking issue.
the parking issue.
So, a meeting in January?
Yeah, I think we're generally fairly flexible.
Well, I'm physically not going to be here in January. This is a meeting you'd have to pick up as vice chair if you.
Or we could have the meeting in Montserrat.
That's another alternative.
Keep in mind, we're still on
The
TV.
Sounds like a
cost-
business
The
expense.
cost might be
If
prohibitive.
If Ken can get us there, I'll go.
Sounds like a business.
In his high-speed boat, he can get in lots of places.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of timeframe Mark is
Cover
looking
that meeting
Yes.
if you want.
for. Okay, sorry?
I'd be happy to cover
She
that
lives
meeting.
once.
I think it's an important one, Mary Ellen, for the farmer's
She
market.
likes to
is
go to the
very-
Caribbean.
Talking about the
Montserrat
Montserrat.
We're going with you, Bill.
Sorry about that.
And Roger's gonna do a little exploratory work before we have that meeting. He's
No, I,
gonna-
no, that, I think that's what makes
And
sense, because
that
I
was
think we
our
want to
idea.
begin to have,
Yeah.
and then in terms of, the parking in the boat ramp section, I mean, I think informally that happens now in many respects. And then for much of the farmer's market season before the boating season, that's probably fine.
Yes.
When trailers start filling up the launch ramp area, then that's when it becomes.
So parking in the boat ramp parking lot for that type of activity is strictly prohibited. But I do understand that it's prior to the boating season, so what we would have to do is we'd have to get permission from the state to park cars for that type of an activity.
So let me clarify though, Ken, because
Yep.
I'm not talking about the vendors. I'm talking about people coming down to the whole area, just residents coming down to visit the boat ramp, look at the Iron Horse Park, go over to the farmer's market. We can park there now. We
You
don't,
just can't put a big
Correct,
sign
you don't
up,
want to
farmer's
promote, you
market
don't want to
parking.
promote it, but what we also have happen, and numerous people have gotten tickets for it last season, and they're very upset, is they park in the boat trailer spots, and a ticket there is not a $20 ticket, it's a $100 ticket. So, we have numerous of these people that were very upset that they had to get a $100 ticket for parking in a trailer spot, and, even if they.
that's a big
If
problem
they
in
do
the
park
summer.
there and they walk over, I mean, it's still inconsistent with the regulations. It's not to say they can't do it, because the idea of the parking spots there are for access to the harbor. Now, I know that this is obviously before the boating season starts, people probably aren't using it, it might be dead. But I think it's just important the way, you express that to people, It's not something that we wanna really promote because it is against the regulations. And that is one of the things that we're working very hard to get a new boat ramp in place. There's gonna be new signage that's gonna be going up next summer, so it'll be much more clear for people where they can park and what the restrictions are on that.
Will the parking fees be noted on the signs?
Yeah, there will be signs that will express
Parking
much more
in a-
clearly what the regulations
I think
are.
that's probably important. People need to understand
Yeah.
that.
The only thing I want to add, Bill, because it just came to mind, the boardwalk idea, is Roger can point out, we got very good numbers on the parking lot stabilization to the extent, and we've already had a conversation with the contractor, that we probably have enough money for the walkway to continue the walkway across the selectmen's parcel.
Really?
Yes, so, which again, we really have to deal with your committee and the selectmen. The money can come out of ours, and I think it shouldn't be an issue, but where's that going? And then where does it land on the boat ramp parking lot? If you walk it, that's a little tighter, as to where you put it. It's easy to go across like a grass strip and put it. When you suddenly get there, if you walk it, I've done it a couple of times now, it's like, okay, I'm trying to figure, where's this thing going, especially if it's 10 feet wide? And I think we gotta start working with Jack Shepherd as they design that parking lot.
Stripe it.
How does it work? How does a walkway work through it? So again, there's a lot of moving parts to this.
I hear it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where we come back to, is there a landscape master plan for the whole area? Because it was, a little unnerving to be picking material, to be offering up our opinion on materials for a walkway when we don't know, what is it all gonna look like? And if we think about moving the bathhouse, would we take the step of putting in a walkway before the bathhouse is sited?
But as I've said before, and as Alan remembers from years past, we have to be careful not to use the master plan and get everything done or nothing gets done, because when we have the opportunity, if somebody presents us with the money, and we can move quickly enough to actually get a contiguous walkway through the Bathing Beach trustees and the bandstand parcel, even if it stops at the launch ramp parking lot, that is such an accomplishment. As one of our deceased members always said, the thing that frustrated him was sitting year after year and seeing no physical changes. It does bother one sometimes, even though the point is well taken that we have to keep in mind the contiguous nature of these improvements in the master plan. But we can't let it atrophy us into inaction. And that's expressing the frustration of those of us that have been on the committee for a long time.
It may vouch for having a subcommittee, Bill, as far as like a trustee member, a member of this committee, somebody on behalf of the, the beautification committee, whatever we call it, the shade tree
Right.
committee. Because we've had task force before that have been pretty
Yeah.
good.
I'd like to get-
With a little bit of money and maybe some of the seed money we get either out of the, the proof of concept thing, arguably for the bathhouses, how do you physically get there?
Right.
Not just, the utilities are gonna have to go across the parking lot
Just
for the boat ramp. So as you're looking at that, you're putting a walkway over it, and what's that? But, very good point, Deirdre, but it's like,
It is.
now's the time to start looking at that stuff
It's like
pretty
the
hard.
Summer Street thing, though. I mean, Amy and I want to extend it to the Lobster Pound, but Roger and Deidre, especially Roger's saying, be careful, you have to bite off what you can get through
Yeah.
the state. So I think this is ripe for because of the holidays and of people's agendas and the time that's going to be needed to get a meaningful meeting organized, I think we're looking at late January for a joint meeting with your committee and our committee. The chairman will have to help me out to get ready for that meeting, but I think we could pull it off and get at least the discussion started. We may not get anything decided, but we may get it
And I think for the initial conversation, it'd probably be better to start with full committees from both.
Yes, I think so.
And then if it makes sense to work down into in a subcommittee or working committee on it, then that.
Yeah.
But I know they're hot to trot.
Does anybody have a calendar for later January that they're thinking about times at work? For both groups?
Before we convene though, if I can just bring up quickly, Jack Shepherd's group. Oh, we're not.
Yeah, we're not breaking yet.
Just
Okay?
looking
This
at a
is
potential meeting.
It's ultimately gonna be there, Paul, but, you're raising it a little out of order, but
Okay,
that's fine.
all right, I didn't look at the agenda quite clearly. We'll wait.
Did you have suggestions, Bill, for when you thought the committee would meet, even if you weren't here?
We've traditionally met either a Tuesday or a Wednesday in January. Ken, what's your schedule?
January, early on, I have a lot of flexibility. Once we get into February and stuff, I'll be available Monday and Wednesday nights, I believe.
But January could be either.
Yeah,
So
January.
a Tuesday or
early
Wednesday
on, I
in,
have a lot of
in late, I can't picture the days.
Schedule? Ed and I are pretty flexible. So you run.
I can work. I mean, I don't have.
I think we're pretty flexible on our end, Bill.
18th is, yeah.
Okay, the 19th is a Tuesday?
So Martin Luther
Yeah.
King Day is the 18th.
Oh, the
That's a
18th.
holiday. But the Tuesday, the 19th?
Yeah, a lot of people go skiing, but still they
Should
should
work
be
for
back.
us.
Is Tuesday nights better for your group? No?
We're flexible. As long as, Chris is the only one who travels on
Yeah,
occasion.
I mean,
Ed
I don't
and I
know
are
yet.
flexible.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, some people are away on the 18th, but they'll be back hopefully.
You'd be back on the 19th.
I think the 19th, the 20th, the 26th, or the 27th, the best. How do those ring to those people that carry their schedules in their phones? I generally should be available on most of them.
So Tuesday or Wednesday, two successive
Two
weeks.
successive weeks, Tuesday, Wednesday.
What I usually do is poll, saying,
Oh, all right.
send out an email to these 4 dates, and unless people
19,
can
20.
address it right now, because we've
All
got
right,
all
I'll
but
add the
one.
beach committee to it and poll everybody then. Okay, we'll get it that. But that's what I'm looking towards, so you can give us enough time frame. It's probably worse for Ken because he's,
Yeah.
gets busier with other activities later in January, but
Those
it's.
look fine.
Do you want to just
I'll do what
go
you-
for it? Target Tuesday, the 26th, if that's,
I'll send an email like
okay.
you do.
I mean, it's
And,
either way. If you can nail it when you've got most people here, it makes
Oh,
sense.
all right, let's pick
I
one.
wonder if the 19th works, though. I know Mark Cullings is really eager to get on this.
Okay.
And I'm just thinking, if we're gonna have to move this into a subcommittee,
Yeah. Roger, does that give you
What
time?
do you
the
want?
19th, is the 19th okay?
We can focus on that.
Yeah,
Tentatively, we'll focus on the 19th.
okay.
Does
Yeah,
that
but you
give
maybe check
Roger
it with
enough
Brian.
time? I'm
Oh,
just,
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, some
19th.
basic for,
so
yeah.
tentatively the
Tentatively the
19th.
19th.
Yep.
Subject to feedback from the committee and the other committee. And Brian, who's sick tonight. Oh, Brian Nees is sick tonight, just so we know. He did check in with us.
Okay, so the only other matter that I had in my list, I've raised it earlier, is that the Community Preservation Committee, Roger will be sitting as in his DPW slot there, but Carol Costello sent something to me today. I think the time for our committee is something like 8:15 on the 7th of January, which is a what? Paul, I'll forward that to you.
Okay, thank you.
And
What is-
it's not as if, at this
Thursday.
juncture, I think we do need to address, when we met with CPC, they asked a couple of questions. And one was, had we considered a solar alternative to lighting for the bridge?
Okay,
That's probably worth some, further conversation, Paul, between you and Roger in terms of how viable that is. I raised to the person who asked the question of, where you'd have the panels.
Well, I have Alan Peralt. This is Whitney Wharf Bridge,
Yes,
CPC?
yes, the lighting.
Alan, will you be able to make that meeting?
Yeah, I have a meeting that night, too.
I think what time are you
I'm
on?
like 2 people before you, so I can
So-
stay there anyway.
Oh,
it's not a
good.
big
So that would,
Yeah.
we'd have some assistance on
With my
that.
two allies here, I think.
The other was just, looking at Paul, just looking at the cost and asking, have we explored other avenues? We know when we put the request together that the number came from the York Engineering
Right.
bid.
Right.
They had gone to a subcontractor. Whether, if we were able to use some local, vendor with perhaps some connection to the town, that bid might come down somewhat. So I think those are the two questions that I think specifically they were looking for some sort of response.
I will reach out to you and Roger before that time
Okay.
to get our act together. Thank you.
So those are the only matters I had. Ken, we didn't leave spot for
That's
you for
fine.
this meeting because so much of the focus was on these two presentations. Is there anything
I
particularly?
just wanted to bring up, I think we had talked briefly about the beach management. I don't know if it was you or I or Alan maybe, but I think that they're going to be putting the new seawall in hopefully this spring. And I think it'll be important to, at least internally, start keeping a record of, when we take profiles of the beach, when it gets to its, engineered profile, and then, when we take subsequent
Readings.
of
Yep.
that, and when we make, when we move the sand around, so that we can start documenting that. But also, we have to demonstrate it that we can keep the sand off the boat ramp. That's really what Jack Shepherd's group is waiting to see, is how are we gonna be able to manage the sand? If we can manage it, they're gonna treat it differently. If we can't manage the sand, then they'll do a different type of design. So I think as we come into next season, we don't have any designs right now, but it'll be important to, get it to profile and then start actually managing it and trying to keep the sand out of the boat ramp as best we can, so we can start documenting and showing him that we're able to do that. I mean, he comes down spontaneously and looks, and it's just full of sand.
Right.
So, and he wants to see how we're gonna be able to manage it, and then that's really gonna influence their design a lot.
Alan, will the contour of the beach below the wall be put in place as they put the wall in this fall?
They'll do that in the spring.
They would wait, they would not, so the only alteration will be that we do have the armor stone, the extended armor stone wall.
Yeah, it's more a block. I mean, it's gonna
Block.
be a precast block, yes.
But no, I'm talking about what was finished, completed construction last year,
Oh, yeah,
which I
yes.
think is clearly going to help in terms of major winter storms, because it just, reduces the amount that there's gouging out.
And the new wall ties, and the new lot wall ties into it, so yeah, and the whole beach
No.
management is based on that.
I think your point is well taken, Ken.
Yeah.
I get it.
The sooner we can start documenting, just even brief notes, so we can really demonstrate to them that
When the
we're.
new contour is laid in, that's when you're gonna wanna document what it is that we want to maintain
Sure.
going forward, so.
Who's gonna measure it?
I don't know whether,
Yeah, well, we'll do.
When you say measure, you mean when it's installed?
Who's gonna
Well, I
measure it
mean,
before and after
the
the?
contractor's gonna have to meet the requirements, and Polaris Engineering will oversee that to make sure that it's done to the contract specification. So we'll have a baseline, we'll have essentially an as-built, correct, that they'll provide, and Polaris will oversee it, right, Roger? Yeah.
But on top of that, we have the beach management plan, which we've adopted, correct? I think that's been fully adopted, right?
Amy,
So
thank
it's
you.
actually making sure that we actually don't just have a beach management plan, but we're actually following through with it. And taking our regular profiles of what the status is of the beach and adjusting the sand where it needs to be ultimately moved.
That's my question, who's gonna do that?
To keep that boat ramp, it's not gonna be free and clear of sand, but to do our best to manage the sand on the beach to maintain the profile.
to the contoured profile that we say it should be.
Yes.
Roger, you have a questionable look on your
No,
face.
there's a contour called out in the beach management plan, but there isn't, I mean, if the assumption is that, I'm gonna go out there and survey the profile of the beach every year, that's.
Not weekly,
No. I mean, that wasn't, I mean, the beach will be maintained at its current profile as called out in the beach management plan, but you don't have to physically go out there and survey it every year to sort of make sure that
Well, I think
that's
it's after after you get through the winter months, we do a profile of what's going on with the beach, what needs to be addressed to bring it back within,
Yeah,
whatever is spelled out in the beach management
Yeah,
plan is what I'm looking to do. I don't know exactly what they are off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but whatever we've adopted as a town is what we need to do to maintain the profile and then, work on keeping the boat ramp clear of sand. So, I mean, it's, like I said, it's not gonna always be free and clear, but do our due diligence to maintain the profile so we're not dumping, minimize the amount of sand that actually flows into the boat ramp, and then what does get there, extract on a regular basis. So I think that's, as we get into the, the spring, we wanna just start that process.
Well, hopefully some of the landscaping we're doing in conjunction with this is gonna help.
That was my question, why, I didn't know whether some of that would happen this winter or
It'll be done in
not.
the spring, but I
in the
mean,
spring.
once that gets done, hopefully the plantings in that area and the slightly more gradual contour by cutting the parking lot back and having a more gradual slope we're gonna know when we're off. If suddenly those new plantings, other things are affected because we have bad storm, we know we kinda have to deal with it, wouldn't you say, Roger? Yeah.
no, I think you're gonna see an improvement, pretty sure of that.
Okay. It's time for questions from the public, and I see a member of the public who wants to be heard. Jack?
From all this conversation, I'm assuming that Jack Shepherd is fully apprised of our beach management plan.
Have you had
I
communication?
do keep pretty regular communications with him.
He knows that the town of Hingham has put forth the money and this construction
Correct.
is about to
And he
start.
said, and that's excellent. But what they want to see is the ability of the town to manage the large volume of sand that's going into the boat ramp, because that will have, that will influence the type of boat ramp that they'll design. They've designed a couple, but
I remember them.
those aren't the final designs, and they really want to see, what reality of the
Right.
sand can we manage? Are we just gonna always have the sand there? Well, then they'll design a different type of ramp and floating system versus,
And where the T-Wharf might go, which side that might.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
That was a very informative meeting with him 2 years ago, so I just wanted.
Yeah, and he comes down regularly and looks, and he's
Oh,
like, well,
good.
you just
He
got the
is.
sand there, you know?
He is.
Oh, yeah, this is a priority boat ramp for them. They really want to,
Yeah.
it's close proximity to Boston. It's definitely something that they want to address. It's just, what level of sand management can we have? And if we can't manage it and it's always gonna be there, that's not a bad thing. It's just, it's gonna influence the type of design, so.
But don't you think they could design a ramp based upon the new beach we're gonna have?
Well, it's not so much, when you say the new beach, what do you mean?
Well, if they were to look at our plans for cutting the parking lot back and what the new contour of the beach is gonna be and the plantings, I'm thinking if I'm a marine engineer and I'm designing the boat ramp, I'd take that into context when I'm designing a boat ramp. I don't know that I need to have it physically built to do it. I'm thinking of timing, with all the things, and it gets to Paul's point earlier, like how long does it take to get stuff done? I know it's gonna take them a while to design it, forget how long it's gonna take them to construct it. And if we have to wait till we physically build this thing and analyze it for a year before we can even start it, and I'm not saying that,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
if that in fact is what we have to do, I'm frustrated that it could be 3 years before we see a boat ramp.
Well, we've been dealing with this issue for a long time. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I think it's not that we have to analyze it for a couple of years, and it's not so much the construction that's being done at the bathing beach. It's completely separate from that, actually. It's just the ability of the town to implement the beach management plan, and can we be effective at managing the sand? So we could have started the beach management plan a while back. We could have started that 2 years ago. But we didn't start 2 years ago, we're starting it now. So it's separate from the construction. It's really the management of the sand and the profiling. Can we keep it to what level can we keep it out of the boat ramp?
But I think, Ken, they are connected because, and I don't want to take too much time in this, Bill, but I think they are connected in the sense it's going to change. Cutting the parking lot back and slightly changing the slope of that and doing some landscaping that's going to keep sand has an
The sand
effect.
is still gonna go into the boat
Oh,
ramp.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're further down the road than we've been before, and we have a beach management plan. I'm thinking, given those, because I think Roger's on the same page, why can't they start designing a ramp?
Because they wanna see the ability of us to manage our sand. Right now, we can't manage our sand.
I thought we had voted on that years ago.
No, it was in the spring. We all
No,
voted
no,
on it.
no, way back, when you were the chairman. I
Yeah.
thought we voted on a beach management.
Yeah,
plan.
but we only voted, a beach management plan was approved this spring by all these committees.
We discussed
So
it.
it was approved this spring. I mean, have we done anything with the beach, or is it just a document that's just sitting there? Have we implemented it? Have we?
Can I suggest we put this on the agenda for the 19th?
Yeah, but Roger's here. If we
Okay,
have
all
5
right,
minutes,
go
I'd like
ahead.
this
No,
talk.
go ahead.
I don't get the frustration, and I'm not frustrated with you. I
Yeah.
don't see why they can't,
Yeah.
I guess is my question.
And the-
Is, because we didn't have a horrible year this year anyway. The DPW did move some sand.
Let's get the chronology right, because we're on TV, and I don't want
Right.
to understand what's going on here.
Right.
So there never was a beach management plan,
Right.
ever.
We discussed it. but we-
So then, the town of Hingham, DPW would regularly go out there when necessary.
Right.
Either excavate around
That's what I was thinking.
the boat ramp, and then if necessary, import sand and
Right.
put that on the sand so that it
On
would be
the,
ready.
on the bathing
Okay.
beach,
The bathing beach.
Right,
to
right.
fill in where it had been gouged out.
Or
Right,
move-
by
or
the
move,
weather.
move it when there was.
And it varied from year to year. Some years you needed to do very little, other years you had a bad winter, so it would depend. So that's the way it was for 30 years, 25 years, whatever.
Informal, right.
Subsequent to that, we had a new conservation officer come in, and she said, we've got this, we've got to do. That year, that spring, we put together a beach management plan, not 2 years, wasn't required any time before that, so right away, a beach management plan. So it hasn't been in that, we haven't had a beach management plan for 3 years.
It was March.
It
I
was
think
March,
yeah.
so
Correct.
now it's, March, and now there's not anything to maintain at this point. So if there was anything to maintain, it would be just the guys going down there and excavating around the boat ramp from time to time. Don't know if they've done that this year as much as they needed to. Not they needed to do that much this year at all, but there's nothing to maintain because we haven't even, the season hasn't even, we're not even through to the winter yet, so there would be nothing to maintain. Next year,
Next
if
spring.
required, or
So
next
there's
spring.
the beach management plan, because I haven't looked at it recently,
Yeah.
but doesn't it have profiles that we're supposed to maintain?
Yeah, it does,
Have
but
we assessed any of them? And then, let's set up a regular
There's no-
schedule of keeping,
there's no
of
track record,
cleaning the
there's no
sand
history.
out of the boat ramp. Let's start just kind of setting up a track record, a plan. How often are we gonna move the sand out, so we can demonstrate to them, hey, listen, we got a plan, this is what we're
I
doing,
guess
we
what I'm
got a
saying
beach
is we're
management
not,
plan.
but there's
Let's
nothing
put that
to,
into play,
there's nothing to move, though. What are we moving?
the sand out of the boat ramp.
Is there sand there now?
Yeah, there's always sand in that boat ramp.
Okay,
There's
so-
more now than that
There's-
I've ever
there's
seen.
a ton
So
of
so
sand
the
in the boat
process
ramp.
in the beach as I know, I wrote most of it, the process in the beach management plan calls for the guys to go down there with the backhoe and excavate some of that. So if you see that there's sand that's unacceptable to you at the beach boat ramp, then all you gotta do is call, and that's what's in the,
And we do
call-
that, and that works well.
And then what
but I think
happens?
we should set up there's more probably than we need to talk about right now, because we don't have a lot of time, it's getting late, but we need to set up a regular schedule of going down there, removing the sand, and just demonstrate that we're following our beach management plan, so that we can demonstrate that we can keep the sand out of the boat ramp, so that they're willing to design one and put a new one in.
Okay.
I don't understand the issue. I think
I
we have a
guess-
beach management plan, we want to follow it and keep the
Part,
boat
part of
ramp
this
clear.
is, if we pass this management plan, what, mechanisms were in place in terms of, maintaining that plan? And most specifically, whose responsibility is that? Where do we look? Is it the bathing beach trustees because it's initially the bathing beach sand that moves? Or is it the DPW because they're the ones who make the fix? Or is it the harbor master who,
So what the-
raises the red flag when there's too much sand on the boat ramp to have it be effective? And I'm not sure that I'm hearing that the management plan that we put into place necessarily addressed the mechanics of how we would,
Oh, it did.
Oh, it did.
Okay.
It did. It was very, extremely detailed.
Okay.
Very thick and heavy.
Ken, you had a fair amount of input.
You had,
Yeah,
you
I
reviewed
guess,
it.
why aren't we are we doing anything
How about the
to
beach management plan?
implement it?
With
I
the
mean,
beach
we need to
management,
implement
let me
that.
tell you what, let me help you out here. So what the beach management plan says, it doesn't say every Tuesday of every month, we're gonna go down there and check to see how much sand is at the boat ramp. Because on this Tuesday, there might be this much, on the following Tuesday, there might be none, because it's cyclical, it's weather dependent.
Correct.
So it's intended to be reactive, because we don't know what's happening with the sand from a day-to-day basis. What it says in the plan is that once there's an accumulation, an appreciable accumulation of sand at that location, somebody will contact the DPW, that DPW would go out there with the backhoe and remove the sand.
Correct.
So
So we
there's-
also have a borrow area, correct? That borrow area needs to be, sand needs to be taken from there, so we have an area that can accumulate before it gets into the boat ramp. So we need to take from that borrow area, bring it up to the beach, decrease the volume of sand there, so that as it flows down the beach, it will collect in the borrow area and not in the boat ramp. So we need to be more proactive rather than reactive.
But that borough area, and again, not to jump in, is gonna be where the new beach is established. When we establish a new beach, that borough area is supposed to be where the Armstrong Wall kinda
No,
comes in.
the borrow area is right next to the boat ramp.
He means
that
it's
borrow.
just to the
Yeah.
north of the
Oh, that
boat.
So,
In other words, it
you have,
accumulates
that's the
there.
nourishment area,
That's the
that's where the
nourishment area.
sand is moved to.
Right.
Correct.
So what happens is, right now, if you go down to the borrow area,
Oh, yeah.
it's full of sand.
Yeah, and
It's
then it
just,
gets,
so what happens is, it's not, we need to decrease the amount of sand there so that the sand will collect in the borrow area and not in the boat ramp. So this is where we have to look at the whole beach, and sometimes we might need to put it right up in the nourishment area, and we might see another low spot that,
Yeah.
it's getting it up to the boat ramp, parking lot where there's some more sand that needs to be deposited up there. So that's the whole idea of looking at the whole beach as a whole, and not waiting for the sand to just accumulate on the boat ramp, but actually decreasing the volume of sand in the springtime at the borrow area, putting it into the nourishment area so that there's more sand to feed the beach.
but not
This
to,
is what the beach management plan's all about.
sounds as if there needs to be some further conversation, with you speaking to, who is it at DPW, Roger?
Oh, Randy,
Randy
you
Sylvester?
called him?
Okay.
Yeah, I've talked to Randy a couple
Okay.
times, but
Regarding this issue?
we've had some meetings with Ted, and we've had some meetings with you guys down there, we've looked at this.
I mean, we haven't met in a long
Well,
time ago, but I mean. at
Maybe
the-
you didn't show to that meeting, but we did have some
I
meetings.
wasn't.
Let's,
Does anyone know when the last time the ramp was actually excavated out? Because I used the ramp very frequently. I got more boats than I got moorings, and I'm in and out of the water all the time. And my observation is, it hasn't been done this summer. That ramp's been filling in more and more. The window of usable ramp time is getting smaller and smaller. I've had to turn around and leave a boat, in the water because I couldn't get it out and I was going away. And I said, all right, well, hope there's no storms.
We can't just be reactive, we have to be proactive. We have to set some standards of when the boat ramp's gonna be checked. We need to, early on in the spring, after we get through the storms, we need to take a large volume of sand from the bar area, nourish the beach at the top, so that that bar area can then be a receptive area to collect the sand as it drifts down. Because it's, regardless of what we do to build a seawall up there at the bathing beach, the sand is still gonna flow. It's still gonna move along, down the.
I know.
Less,
along the
less,
beach.
we
It may
hope
be
so.
less, but no, it's still gonna move.
Still gonna move,
The
so-
repose is gonna be a little more gradual, like the
Correct.
selectmen's parcel, but it'll still move, no question.
So, we need to decrease the amount of sand in that area, keep a closer eye on the, and I don't think, it shouldn't be reactive, it really should be much more proactive, so we can keep the ramp clear for the people to use.
Paul, it sounds as if you have one topic
No,
for
we're
your
not-
agenda for the
But I get
19th.
where Alan's coming from, and I think it maybe be able to bifurcate beach management plan and construction of the new boat ramp with extending the boardwalk. If they move at warp speed and get us a ramp, not a boardwalk, not only across the trustees parcel, but across the bandstand parcel, then the next shoe to drop is what we'll call the Ken parcel, which is the boat ramp parcel. And if to the degree that we can accommodate moving a walkway across there prior to his even getting his boat ramp, we may have accomplished our goals.
It's all gonna be part of the
and still-
design, so that's kind
and
of my
still-
point.
what's
It's all
that?
part of the design of the parking lot, and the ramp is gonna be, where does this
I get it, but
walk go?
walkways are relatively inexpensive compared to
You just gotta figure a way to put it, though, where it fits. I'm kind of,
All right.
10 o'clock.
Any other business to come before us? We opened the door and something else walked in and we talked about it for a bit, but that's fine. Any other business? Deirdre?
I just have a question, if there should be someone on HDC, keeping intimately apprised of the Lincoln Maritime, or the Hingham Maritime Center negotiations, or abreast of that, so we can get an informed update on what's happening with that, key part of the harbor.
No longer LMC, but HMC, correct?
Hingham
The
Maritime
new
Center.
name
Well, I can
is
tell
Hingham.
you, they're still working on negotiating the lease, and it's just been time-consuming, and there's a few items that still.
Full disclosure, you're on that board.
And I'm on that
So you
board.
would have to recuse if we were in any serious discussion on that.
Right.
It would, be.
But then you can update us on the
But you
19th.
can certainly
Well,
be
that's all I
be a linkage in terms of information. Yeah, that had been my understanding, that a document has been exchanged back and forth, but not yet resolved.
Right.
At this juncture.
Yeah.
Okay. Deirdre, I think the only other thing you'd raised at the beginning, as we were wrapping up on your presentation, is that the thought was that we would take the summary results, drop it if possible by merging the SurveyMonkey format and the results coming out of Professor Wiseman, and then post that on our website? Is that the?
Correct.
And Kate offered to give us a hand in terms of certainly getting it on. The question is
What does it look like?
and the work in between. But that's something that we can undertake.
And just to the degree that, we'll be looking forward to the January meeting, and I think we're going to have an ongoing discussion on the Summer Street Rotary. We'll circulate it with an agenda, as Bill will show me how to do that. Snack shack, bathhouse issues will be discussed in the joint meeting. Beach management plan, boat ramp, especially if Ken's able to be here, further discussion of that. And we'll put Lincoln Maritime on as an informal topic for just discussion.
I think it
And
just
any-
makes
any
sense
other
that
things.
we stay close to what's happening. They've got a long road ahead of them in terms of, their objective, but it ties very much into the work that we're gonna be doing in terms of surveying the wharfs. Where Hingham Maritime resides. Frankly, I didn't understand why we dropped our most, important historical connection from the name, but that's all right.
Decision was made before I was part of it.
Anyway, so
call it the
Paul,
Lincoln Bathhouse, we'll pick it up.
But I think it's neat that
That's
the
true.
Hingham
That's the other-
Maritime is, they're impacted significantly by how the town will approach, you know, the rotary or the signalized
Of course.
intersection and where the access points are? I mean,
course.
theirs is the only entry point that changes depending on what is decided for the
Right.
rotary.
Well, I think discussing them in tandem on the 19th, at least a starting type discussion. We heard a lot tonight. We heard a lot of comments. And we've all been educated by your presentation and Roger's, and I think that to have our own committee discussion about what we've heard is great. And yes, the Lincoln Maritime entry and what was showed on all the slides, those coincide, so that's.
And the lack of parking.
Right, I don't think we're gonna decide anything on those topics, but we could at least get into it in our usual format, which is less formal than this particular format.
I'd be remiss in not, again, thanking both Roger and Deirdre particularly for the work to pull something like this off, and I'm hoping that the public will have that opportunity. I know Mary Ellen's going to have an article in next week's paper.
Yeah, now, when you said you were gonna bring this to the selectmen too, both of these?
The discussion regarding the contract with engineers to use the $400,000 will ultimately be a contract approved by the selectmen, and I had understood from the assistant town administrator that schedule in their agenda is in January because they're focused so much on budgets in December.
Yeah.
So
So are you bringing the Summer Street survey to them too, or?
they have access to it.
But you're not gonna discuss it? with
Chairman Healy was here this evening, so we hadn't planned to try to have a meeting with the selectmen on that topic, especially this time of year for them, because they're pretty.
Now, would you be meeting again in this committee before or after Roger brings that to the selectmen, or does one have to do the other at all, or?
I thought that this would be the forum for that presentation, and then they would have to, like you said, approve that $400,000 contract.
Right, but that doesn't have anything to do with you guys continuing.
It's a dialogue, it's not a vote, we're not, I don't think the selectmen,
no
we're not ready for a vote on
Yeah,
anything.
it's not a recommendation from us, because the process in terms of selecting.
Selectmen don't approve for some reason, or
Then we're
don't
interested.
like what the report says, would that have any
The
bearing?
survey or the
No,
traffic
Roger.
study?
Yeah, traffic study.
I don't think they can like it or not like
Oh,
it. It
okay.
is what it is.
It has
You know,
nothing to do with
they
I
they have.
think the whole point, I haven't spoken to Roger or Deirdre specifically, or Bill about this, but I think the whole point of the town appropriating money is to get out in front of the state process, so that as Roger's going to these meetings, we can speak, we'll have our own engineer, we'll have our own, Deidre's study works with the engineer, and it really, and in my experience, working with Alan and others in public construction, if you don't influence the process early, you lose out. So many projects are opposed too late. If you want to influence the project, you have to do it at the beginning. So by Deidre and her group getting the $400,000 appropriated, I think that was a massive stroke of timing, because it gives Roger the tools that he needs to segue with the planning process. It's much easier to change the planning process than when the plans have been adopted. So many projects, people want to change them after the plans are adopted. It's almost impossible, because so much has gone on, and the funding's in place and the design, and people say, oh my God, they're gonna build this, and this is the time to do it. So I don't know exactly what the timing is of people voting on it, but we're just trying to be I think the selectmen asked the chairman if we could help out with this aspect of it, and we are, as an advisory, we're just trying to help do our
So what
part.
you're doing is then just taking that and just bringing it back to them and saying, this is what we found, and this is what we have to deal with money-wise, and.
At some point, maybe.
Well, they're well aware of the money component, and they're working with Roger as he develops. He's got a short list of engineers who might provide this engineering work, and it will be up to the selectmen to make a final choice based on his
By
recommendation.
spending a few $100,000, you get to influence something that's gonna cost the state millions of dollars.
I gotta run.
We're about to lose some of our members. Does that constitute a motion to adjourn, Ken?
You guys can adjourn, but I have to, my
You make
dinner's
the
gonna be
motion.
getting cold very soon, so
Yeah, right.
we're gonna take off, but if you're gonna make a motion, I'll hang out.
All right.
You make the motion, I'll second it.
Anyway.
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting here on December, what is this?
Then we'll-
Fifteenth, 2015.
All in favor? Aye. I just want to close by again thanking HCAM for being here and filming this so it can be available to others. Good night.